Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bristol Town Council meeting of December 16th, 2015. If you could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Good evening, everyone. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all those wonderful things that you look down here and you look around us and we're constantly reminded of what a beautiful town that we live in. And that comes with a lot of hard work. We'll talk about that later. But we're going to start off the meeting with a presentation from Candace Panza, who's the Executive Director of the Bristol Housing Authority. And anytime we start a meeting with a big check coming to us, we're very happy. So welcome, Candy.
Thank you. It's great to be back again, and I'd like to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays. And on behalf of the Commissioners of the Bristol Housing Authority, I'd like to thank you all, as usual, Town Council, Tony Texera, and all the department heads for being so helpful throughout the year to the Bristol Housing Authority. We really, really appreciate it, especially in times with our budgets and everything else the way they are and trying to make ends meet. In 2015, we replaced sidewalks, installed LED lighting on all exterior fixtures, installed security cameras, upgraded all our main electric panels and individual panels in all of our units. Our goal in 2016 is to put energy-efficient windows in buildings S through AA and to revamp our fire alarm system. We're looking at probably well over $500,000 for those two jobs or more. So we're just kind of going for some grants and hoping that we can, do what we can do. And our daily upkeep, our buildings are 45 years old. So, it's difficult because you're the everyday. But in the end, we have safe, secure housing, and I think a beautiful housing complex that certainly I think is a star in the town of Bristol. I have to say that, because if I don't give all these accolades for the Housing Authority, nobody else will. So here I am. It's my chance.
Well, this council agrees with you. It's beautiful. So.
Thank you. Our Section 8 program is a big part of our Housing Authority, which people don't really see. They see the elderly units, but we subsidize 200 very low-income families in the town of Bristol, which is about 381 people. And without this, a lot of these people would be homeless with no fixed housing. So it's really a big deal. We put out over $1 million last year, $1 million to Bristol landlords for subsidies and rent, which eventually, kind of peters down to people spending more money, and the input into the economy of Bristol is certainly a large situation. But I don't know if you had a chance to look at our annual report, but we did highlight one of our Section 8 tenants, Annabella Azevedo, and she asked to just speak to a few minutes to you people. This is the face of our Section 8 program. This means something to you when you actually see a Bristol resident that's receiving assistance, and she just has a very short story to tell, and then I'll come back in.
Welcome, Annabella.
Hi, thank you. I was so grateful when Section 8 opened up. I had become disabled about 3 years ago, and I was on a disability check. My speech is a little bit off, sorry. But I have ataxia, so that occurs with the neurological illness.
You sound wonderful to us.
Thank you. So I've been disabled for 3 years, and when Section 8 opened up, and I was so grateful because I didn't know where I was going to end up. I do have family here in Bristol, but I needed my independence. Due to my illness, I just, watching my father deteriorate and myself in his place, I kept thinking, I can't live there because it'll just make me worse, mentally. So when they opened it up, I was so thankful for that. I just want to let you know I have a form of, it's ataxia. It's a neurological illness that deteriorates your muscles. So I have difficulty sometimes with walking, my speech. It's a neurological illness. And again, I'm just so grateful for Section 8 to help me out because I don't know where I'd be. So I thank you.
Before you leave,
Yes.
We briefly had a discussion at the senior Christmas party.
Yes.
So being in the public right now, just very briefly, you can start as of tonight of your intention of what you would like to bring to Bristol and Rhode Island for your foundation and fundraising efforts to address this disease and disability. We have abundance of people that do a lot of fundraising and foundations, so you might just want to just say what your intent of coming from Massachusetts to Rhode Island is, so we can start now and help you in the near future of the latter of 2016.
I'm actually thinking of doing a walkathon in September. It's a walk and roll, and what they do, they call it walk and roll is because disabled people use a bike that's actually handicapped, that the handles are on the bottom instead of on the top, because we can't hold our hands up too long. So I'd also like to thank Mr. Texera for allowing to get me to the right direction to get a bill passed. We passed a bill this year for Ataxia Awareness Day to be September 25th. And it's celebrated all internationally. Rhode Island is the second state in the United States that have it. The first is Massachusetts. John Morrow, he's the president of my chapter, the New England chapter. We actually have Vermont, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, and Rhode Island. We're all part of a chapter. And John Morrow and I went with he was Senator Ariano, to the State House, and then it went past to the House where Ray Gallison passed it, and in June 25th, the bill passed. So now it'll be on the calendars for 100 years as Ataxia Awareness Day, September 25th.
Beautiful. Congratulations.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story, too.
Thank you.
And basically, this is why I do what I do. It's the love of people and helping people. And after 29 years, it doesn't get old. It really doesn't. So now to the good stuff. On behalf of the Bristol Housing Authority, I'd like to present our yearly check, a pilot check to the town of Bristol for $58,103.
All right, that's great. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good job.
Christmas.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Julie is even smiling.
So we have a lot on the agenda, so we're going to move it right along. Mr. Clerk, if you would.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the Town Council, the first item on the agenda this evening is the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Next, we have submission of minutes of December 2.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, is a public hearing. This is to consider the Transportation Improvement Program project proposals.
Lou, does this require an opening of the public hearing? Would this be a...
This is a regular advertised public hearing, so it's handled the same way as a regular public hearing.
So we're going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in favor?
I'll speak in favor for the record.
Well, welcome, Diane. Hello.
Hey, Diane.
Please.
So this is a process that some of you probably have remembered from years past. Every couple of years, the state asks for our, sort of our wish list of projects in the town related to transportation that we submit to the state of Rhode Island, and it's for projects that they would intend to build using federal DOT funds. So they ask this of all the communities, nonprofits. We submit our list, and we submit a prioritization of our projects, and then those are reviewed with all of the other projects that the state gets, and they develop what they call the TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement List of Transportation Projects. So you'll see tonight, I met with the director of the DPW, I met with Town Administrator Texera, and we put together our recommended list of projects for you into the 3 categories that you have: high, medium, and low priority projects. And again, this is our wish list. We, in the past, have been successful with the state moving these projects forward, but as you are probably well aware, federal funding is tight. They are focusing now on bridges and bridge maintenance, so I can't say with any assurance right now which of these projects, if any, will advance into the plan and what the timing will be. But this is your chance to see if there's anything we missed, if there's anything you want to add, and we'll submit it. It's due January 8th.
So we'll have questions at the end of the public hearing, so Diane spoke in favor of it. Is there anyone here, anyone else here to speak in favor? Okay, we did that 3 times. Oh, Tony, you'd like to speak?
I certainly will. I mean, this is something that we've been contemplating with many of the projects. I mean, the state has looked over, I mean, they had a list that they provided, as Diane already pointed out, and all we did was just prioritize so that from the list that they provided some of the initiatives that they contemplating over time. And I know that we've discussed quite a few of these here, particularly Malcolm Avenue, the sidewalks. Unfortunately, on Hope Street, we missed out on that. Well, didn't miss out. Eventually that project was pulled out due to the lack of funds. There was the sidewalks going north from Agave all the way to Warren, as well as the landscaping, curbing, and so forth. All of that it's shovel ready, except the funding was not there, unfortunately. But it is back on the list, and I'm glad to see that. And also, we talked about Markham Avenue. They right now, as you can see, the attachment B1A addresses that they 90% completed for the intersections there. So they continue that, and we have to thank Representative Ray Gallison. He's been very instrumental on that piece there. So we got to give him the credit for all the support that he has provided, not just for that, but for many of the other projects going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Is there anyone to speak against? Is there anyone to speak against? Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so what questions do we have?
I'd like to ask the town administrator a couple of questions, if I may. This third item under the high priority is the intersection of Ferry Road and Metacom. What final design did they come up with for that? That, I assume, is the intersection in front of Roger Williams' main entrance.
I don't believe that they have a final draft for that, but that is what they would like to address, is what needs to be done there to prevent, because as you can see, that becomes a funnel there as folks trying to get to the bridge and try to make a left-hand turn to go back, to turn around to get to the Russians University. But they are very aware of that, and they certainly will be.
There was a bold idea put forth several years ago, I guess, by the DOT to put a circle there, which I found a little bit puzzling because of the space that's available, but I guess it could be done. So I take it from your answer that these are not imminent to be built.
Correct.
It could be a matter of months and years.
Very true. Some of these here, you're probably looking at least a good 3 years out, if not a little longer.
Now, the second one from Washington Street to the Warren Town line probably is a simpler matter to figure out. But much of that is just dirt path at the moment, isn't it?
It is.
Will that be all cement sidewalk?
That's the intent, is to do cement sidewalks and granite curbing.
So that's quite a big deal.
Yes.
Which would be an asset to anybody who lives along there.
No question.
So true. Much needed. And that was something, if you recall, about 2 years ago, when they pulled the project, they were working on in Warren, and we knew that they already had done all the engineering. They prepped, got a shovel ready. I mean, they did the landscape engineering, the curbing, sidewalks. They had done all the surveying, and they were ready to go. Then suddenly there was no funds available.
And I remember there was some concern by some of our citizens that why Warren, why not Bristol? So maybe this can rectify it. Now, this would be just the west side?
I'm not quite sure on that piece there, Diane. Do you recall that one?
I don't recall.
I would think it would be the west side.
I believe that's what they were entertained. It was what was presently there. They needed improvement, but not add any additional sidewalks.
Yep.
And also, if you recall, this actually part of the discussion was the crosswalks they were supposed to install along the way.
Those have to be suitable for a wheelchair, I guess.
Very true. Yes, they must be going forward.
Well, good luck with it.
Thank you. Well, good luck to all of us, and we hope that, so any help, any assistance in nudging some folks along, please feel free to reach out and don't hesitate.
Please feel free to ask us to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tony, just to dovetail off Councilman Habershoff's second question, you mentioned the crosswalks. I remember when there was way back in 2012, the residents in the northern part of town off Hope Street wanted some crosswalks to get over to the bike path or the bus station, and so that I heard you say that is included as part of the
That
plan?
would have been part of the project.
Great.
Yes, that's correct. They have to
that's
install
exciting to
those
hear.
along the way.
Well, they'll be happy to hear that, because I know it's been a couple years since they put that request in. So
And
glad-
it may be a couple more years, unfortunately. Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, thank you.
Tony, when you said that you didn't think there'd be any new sidewalks, so does that mean that they would just, I thought they were going to, make sidewalks all the way, at least on one side, because in some areas there are no sidewalks, right? You just go over the grassy areas, like I think by the condos, places like that.
Yeah, as Halsey was saying, exactly
Right.
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 Yes.
You're going to put the sidewalks in, or are they not going to?
Yes, they would put on one side only.
Right, okay. Because
Yes.
you had said, like, they're just going to fix what they had. Okay. So they're going to at least have it all the way. There'll be a sidewalk on one side. Okay.
Correct, yes.
Well, I hope this project doesn't go the way of Medicom's project from, like, when I was first on the council in the 1980s, that we still are waiting to have happen. So I hope that,
Well,
when Lou was on the council, I should say.
as you can see, the project is 90% completed for part of it.
Right, it's not on our end, it's the state, like, runs out of money. I understand, yeah. I know, so I'm glad that this is back on.
Well, since we're on that topic of the west side of Hope Street, it's more than 2 years, it's been 4 years, so it's safe to assume the design is ready, and I think timing and being organized for shovel-ready jobs is going to be crucial for municipalities to get in line at a state and federal level right now with funds being released, and that's why this is all being brought out. So this is good news for that final phase. So I think we could get on board with that. But the first one of the 3 intersections on Medicom, and I'm very happy to see that the turning lane that we discussed time and time again of the possibility of a third lane on Medicom is, we don't want to put the cart before the horse, meaning we'll go full throttle with the 3 intersections, not be mindful of that turning lane with surveying and whatnot, and be told later that, well, if we did it, and I was mindful in the beginning with the 3 intersections, we could have done this, but now it's going to cost more money because, we're doing it after. We have to have that communication with the DOT when they do the 3 intersections and start that conversation, because they added that now. So we do appreciate them adding that. The other thing is, because of the funds being released, and because it's the DOT with Medicom, and we talk time and time again of shovel-ready projects, is we're going to bring up the Tanyard Brook Phase 2, Diane, and how we have water runoff from Medicom. So any improvements to Medicom of the water runoff going down Mount Hope or State Street into the reservoir into Tanyard Brook. Tanyard Brook is a shovel-ready project. I think we could communicate with the state and the DOT and Clean Water Finance and the governor's office to try to ascertain more funds right now and try to attach the DOT projects of responsibility to the Tanyard Brook Phase 2. That's crucial that we have that dialogue. I know we're sounding selfish, but it's not that we're selfish. It's just as a town, we have to be positioned, and if we're ready with shovel-ready projects, first in line for the funds, that's key. So just to be mindful of that going forward.
Good point.
Diane, would you speak to that? Is there any appropriateness to connect in some way Tanyard Brook to these, to call them wish lists?
I just added the word drainage next to that medium priority project to look at the design of the corridor improvements. I'll have to maybe sit down with Tony and see if there's a better way to integrate that. We have had conversations in the past with them, but they haven't been able to.
Well, to borrow a phrase from earlier, I know that Tim used dovetail. It would seem appropriate that we could
Right.
Leverage multiple bonds to do all of this together, or I should say attempt to do so. I know that we're very good at doing that.
Right, right. I will talk to the town administrator. I think, one of the, I guess, a caution and a comment is that these are not town projects. These become state DOT projects, and there's a whole different level of complexity, if you will, and I think in the past we've tried to dovetail, and I'm not remembering the project exactly, but I think they wanted us to do the plans and they would do the construction or something, and so maybe if we could come up with something like that. I just don't want your expectations to be higher than what, the state and the federal government will actually do with us, and I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's going to happen. We may actually be in a better position to move some of these things quicker because of our funding opportunities than the state and the federal government.
What I would say then is that make an attempt to do so,
Yes.
but don't let it stand in the way of
Yes.
success.
Right.
How's
Thank
that?
you. Good.
I believe that's what I said, is the key is dialogue,
Right.
to
Well
see if
said.
these are opportunities. In fact, to revisit, I was ready to send an email off to you because I had conversations with Senator Whitehouse's staff and also Cicilline. They want a new version of the Tanyard Brook Phase 2 because they're going to look into what's being dispersed coming up in 2016 and other federal opportunities. So, again, it's timely that we get this information, if you could do that, and just give us, our colleagues, a report.
That's great, yeah.
Diane, you need a motion to support, approve. Tell me what you're looking for.
I believe a motion would be to authorize the town administrator to submit the projects on the list. Right.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good luck.
Okay, the next item is the second reading for adoption of Ordinance 2015-15 as amended. This is the so-called medical marijuana use ordinance, which impacts the zoning code. You have several bits of correspondence from the town solicitor's office. You have two new options that were provided, and also very recently a third option, which I will hand out to you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just say one thing at the beginning of this discussion. We, of course, as a body, the council has the authority to, having done a first reading, to then immediately do a second reading, even though there are modifications in the matter to be voted. However, I think in a case like this, where we've received very radical change in only the last couple of days, that we may need a little more deliberative time in order to fairly assess the value of the very much changed ordinance in regard to second approval.
So what Halsey is speaking of is that there was lots of effort and energy spent, as we all know. There was a workshop done. There was a first reading and a public hearing. I'm sorry, there was a first reading, then there was a second reading that we didn't actually take a vote on that. We continued it to this meeting. That effort and energy, we heard a lot of concerns, and justifiably so, about HIPAA, which is privacy. We'll just simplify it and call it privacy. That was expressed by more than a few counselors, too. So from hearing that again and again, I reached out to the solicitor and I said, I know Mary expressed this, I know Ed expressed this, I know Tim expressed this. We all had the same concern, but they were expressed by those three, I would say, the most vocally. Mm-hmm. Those concerns were about the individual rights, and I think we all agree on that, about going and showing a card and going into a place that you don't want to be on a medical end of things. Right. So I asked the solicitor to draft the ordinance, which actually is the same ordinance, but removing all of the residential, the non-residential. So what is in front of us is a multitude of choices, as the clerk just mentioned. The last and the most recent is the one that I had asked from the solicitor yesterday, and which we all have. And it, as I said, it gets rid of all the, we'll call it individual end of things. So the only thing that's left in this, and at this point I think is rightly so, speaks to the Compassion Center and speaks to, Mike, help me with the other one. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Emporium.
Yep.
So I would ask, Mike, if you could expand upon that. So,
Sure.
And before you do, Halsey mentioned that this was new information. And yes, it is new in the sense of it's changed, but everything afterwards has not been changed at all. So,
right.
So please.
Basically, the ordinance that you had before you is before you again, except with deletions. So nothing new has been added into it. We've simply deleted. So, Nathan, I think you put it well when you said there was a lot of feedback at the podium during the public hearing, concerns about the HIPAA laws, concerns about individuals who had medical marijuana cards being outed or exposed, et cetera. And so what I've done basically is, as you stated, I've removed all the regulations that would apply to the individuals, the cooperatives, et cetera, that would have to go either to the building official or even further to a zoning board hearing. All of that is now gone. What you have now is an ordinance which regulates two areas. One of the compassion centers, and as you may all recall, there are 3 of them allowed by state law in 3 different locations in the state. If one closes or if the state decides to increase the number of compassion centers, it is possible, conceivable, that one might want to locate in Bristol. If that is the case, what this ordinance does is it basically says you can only locate in 2 areas, the general business area and the Medicom mixed-use area, and you have to go through a special use process permitting. Now, although those people would have to make themselves known, that's not an issue for this reason. To run a compassion center, you must first be licensed by the state. The regulations under the state licensing are, number 1, you must identify the place where it's taking place, and number 2, you must identify all the members of the board of directors and the people running the compassion center, as well as their dates of birth, et cetera. So all of that is a public process at the state level. For the zoning level, we require the same thing. What's the address and who are you applying? And then we go forward with our hearing. So there's no HIPAA implications whatsoever there. The next one is the medical marijuana emporium, where an individual opens up a hall or a concert center or a movie theater or whatever, and then invites people in with medical marijuana cards to both enjoy the music, the movie, the gaming, whatever, while at the same time smoking. We prohibit that. We say you can't do that anywhere in town. So Other than that, the rest of the ordinance in terms of the whole process is the same, but it just now affects those two areas. So again, I did this based upon the feedback and what I heard from Nathan. So really, it's the third version of this ordinance that has been provided to you. That's the one that I would recommend to you.
So addressing the third version, and just for clarification, so there's only two items in front of this council that would be permitted to a new regulation towards our zoning, and that would be one, the marijuana emporium not to be in any zone in our town, so that's easy. Number two, about the compassion centers.
Yep.
But as our solicitor stated, even before it comes to the town of Bristol, if someone, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's only 3 allowed right now. That doesn't mean it's not going to change at the state level. But even if one closes or one wants to move to Bristol from Portsmouth or Warwick or Providence,
Or where, right.
I would imagine, Michael, that they would still have to notify the State Department of Health because it's a new location and a new process has to be made. It's not just because they have that license, they're leaving one location and going to another municipality, so they have to go through the whole procedure again.
They have to go through the whole procedure again, and one of the items that the state has to take into consideration is the interest of the city of the town where the dispensary would be located. So that's right in the state law.
You stole my words, because if we regulate, or they have their license and they still come before us to go into the 2 zones, does the town of Bristol have a say at the licensing hearing of the intentions versus with our zones in our town?
Absolutely. We have every right to be there, and if we disagree with that location, we will be heard at the state. If the state somehow overrides that and says, no, it's going to go there, then they now have to go through our local process.
And aside from that, to finish off, is all the regulations and the use in those zones is mirrored to the state itself on how they regulate it.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chairman, even though I've had doubts about all the material that has now been excised from this, I think it would be very helpful to all present and those on viewing the TV if you could expound, perhaps with the solicitor, a little more about how this has moved forward. Because previously, I think there was the assertion that all those very specific directions about the number of plants and all kinds of locations and details and all was essential. And now it seems like we're being told that that is no longer necessary. And I think we need to perhaps have a little help in understanding this extreme modification of the original.
Mike?
So the issue with the number of plants, whether it's 12 or 24 or then finally 48, that involves individuals in their own homes or together with someone else in a cooperative growing them for their own use, basically. Mm-hmm. The Compassion Center, on the other hand, is a place where you go to purchase marijuana on your own because you're not interested in growing it yourself. And what we've done, again, based upon feedback, individuals who have medical marijuana cards are licensed by the state to grow their own plants. And the concern was if we had those individuals go through a zoning process, right, they would then have to reveal to the world that they had a prescription. I mean, that's what a medical marijuana card is. It's basically no different than going to a pharmacy and getting yourself a prescription. None of us have to reveal to anyone whether or not we're ill, whether or not we're taking a prescription, what that prescription is, etc. So the concern was that if we adopted the ordinance as originally conceived, that perhaps there could be issues with individuals having to say, I'm sick. I mean, you did have some individuals come to the microphone and they freely told you, here's the medical condition I have. The marijuana is the only thing that helps me. Thank God I could get it, and it's been decriminalized in this state. Others may not want to do that, just like none of us can be forced to tell anyone, even an employer, that we're on certain medications, etc. So we eliminated, Halsey, all of the requirements for individuals. However, if you want to put in a compassion center, which I'll call like a retail store, you are, in fact, going to have to go through the process. or if you wanted to open up an Emporium, we're saying you can't do that at all. So state law permits it now. We originally proposed that it be regulated, meaning the individuals, but based on the feedback that you all received, and a lot of feedback from all of you, we eliminated that. That's not to say that in the future things can and will change. The Attorney General's office is putting together a group that involves police chiefs, and a lot of other individuals to look at this law at the state level, because there are a lot of challenges in enforcement issues and the whole idea of the HIPAA issues, et cetera. So it's fluid. I think that you're going to see changes going forward in this next session, perhaps, of the legislature. And like all of your ordinances, as those changes are made, we may want to make further amendments to this particular ordinance.
Can I just say, Mike, and I think that you hit the nail on the head in that respect, because there's a lot of people, we've gotten other, correspondence from people that talk about we shouldn't be allowing medical marijuana, we shouldn't have it in our town, et cetera. I don't think anybody here is a proponent of one way or the other, or no one's a proponent of increasing drug use and or illegal substances, because we have a serious problem in Rhode Island and in the Northeast and in this country, particularly with opiates, and everybody knows it. And I think it was just something on the news as I was coming home on the radio tonight about that. I think, but that is an issue that the legislature has to address. They've allowed medical marijuana, and they set those parameters forth.
Right.
And I think our issue, a lot of what you said sounded like my email to you, as a matter of fact, but
see, you do make a difference.
I don't know. Sometimes you have to 3 or 4 meetings worth of time. But
Patience.
Patience. I know it's a virtue. I've been around it long enough. But I think the point is, I think this started out as the Emporium issue, and I think as so often happens in legislation, everything ends up in a piece of legislation, and it becomes little, sometimes overkill or over the top for what the issue that we're trying to address. And what we're trying to address was to not have an Emporium. I think that is in a compassion center, but and in my view, the Emporium is probably the most important aspect of it, because I know anytime I've driven by that compassion center in Middletown or Portsmouth, I don't really see anybody there or cars there. But be that as it may, that's an issue for the legislature to decide. And so much of this issue on the enforcement, on whether or not people are fooling around their cards and selling it illegally or giving it away to other people or whatever, I think that needs to be addressed. I think it needs to be looked at seriously, and I think people need to be, if they are doing those things, they need to be clamped down. I think one of the testimonies that we heard at the workshop was that people wouldn't jeopardize their card to do that. But then you hear other people say, well, that happens all the time. I don't know. I really have no idea. But I think that the Attorney General, the advocates, the legislature need to figure out how they're going to make sure that this law on medical marijuana is not abused, and so that it doesn't end up hurting the people that actually benefit from the substance, But I think from our end, it's on point for us to just go forward at this point in time with the compassion centers and the Emporium, because I don't think any of us even knew that there were people doing growers, until that last council meeting when those people came and said we're growing. So, in addition to the HIPAA laws and the privacy, is also the safety of knowing that if you have to tell someone that you're going to be growing marijuana publicly, what does that do for you and your family's safety? And so, I think the police are aware of where these places are, and they check in on them. But the whole public, it doesn't have to be a matter of public record, I think. And so I think that I favored this latter version over the others, and this has been sort of a long saga as we've gone forward. And much discussion all the way around, so.
Well, Mary, I think it's worth adding to your very good statement the fact that, as I understand it, there is on the books a federal law that very much constrains the use of things like marijuana or any other drugs. And it's only because at this time the federal government has decided not to enforce that law, which is on the books after congressional legislation, it's only because the federal government does not enforce that law that the state is able to even produce a law which is much more liberal. And I take it's because of that we're, as one of the 39 cities and towns, required to follow the state law.
Yes, we are. We have no choice but to follow the medical marijuana law in the state of Rhode Island. But we can control by zoning in the way that I'm suggesting you do so.
But in so doing, we're actually doing something against federal law.
Well, we're not.
Only because the state has chosen to set it aside.
But we're not. It's not the town that's permitting this. It's the state that's permitting it. It's we as a town are not saying it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
We're saying, given that fact that the state is forcing this down our throats, we want to try to control it to the best of our ability at the town level because the state is not helping us.
But we have to follow the state law. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, now, in this change you made, I'd like to, if I may, suggest one more thing be put back. At the preparation for the last meeting a couple of weeks ago, you put in quite a lot of explanatory whereas statements, which I think were very constructive. But in the most recent version, the last two of those have been stricken from the document. And I would like to suggest that we put back the final one, which used to say, whereas in adopting this ordinance, the town is not seeking to promote the use or cultivation of medical marijuana, but rather is seeking to regulate the location and intensity of the use of the medical marijuana cultivations. Possibly you might want to change some of that wording, but I think something to that effect would be good to have so that the action of the council, if this were to pass, would not be misunderstood.
Yeah, I think that's a good change, and what I would do, Halsey, is I would stop it at the word medical marijuana, so that last whereas clause where everything is stricken, my suggestion would say you put back in, whereas in adopting this ordinance, the town is not seeking to promote the use or cultivation of medical marijuana, period.
Yeah, I think so.
And just leave the period right there, because the rest of that sentence actually referred to stuff that's no longer in there anymore.
Right.
But I think that does make sense because it gives the message that we're not promoting the use.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we adopt the language just espoused by the solicitor in restoring that particular item.
There's a motion. Is there a
Second?
So there's a motion and a second. Discussion on my part is I had asked the solicitor months ago to start this whole process, and as we all five of us sitting here, we're charged to make some difficult decisions. Some we have put in front of us, and others we go looking for, and this one kind of went looking for. It's a challenging one, and we heard a lot of people share some concerns, and I believe these adjustments have addressed those concerns directly. And I think it's appropriate that we move forward with this. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No, was that
Unanimous.
just on the change or the amendment?
That was just
No
on
one
the
Just on
change?
the amendment, right? And that, just to be clear, that period was after the first medical marijuana.
Correct.
Right.
All right, so now you need a motion to adopt what's called version C, because you have an A, a B, and a C, so that the clerk is...
Will I be allowed to be heard?
No, and the
Why
reason
not?
why is that we had a public hearing. If I allow you to speak, if we did close the public hearing, then I would have to allow everyone to speak. So I can't allow you to speak.
Right.
Was the public hearing not on an iteration of that ordinance that is substantially changed?
This, I'll tell you what, I'm going to allow that question to be answered,
Sure.
and we're going to stop right there because
Sure.
it's a fair question.
It is a fair question. The ordinance is exactly the same ordinance that was discussed at public hearing, but sections of it were deleted based upon public comment. And so as a result, what they're adopting is no new language at all. It's all the language that's been out in the public, except that it's eliminating or deleting certain language. I would agree that if, in fact, we came in
Substantive.
with a whole new substantive paragraph, but it's all deletions. So.
Well, I think it's fair to say, if I remember correctly, without looking this up, the version we had the public hearing on had already deleted, like the first, like two there might be like one additional deletion from
Yes.
from that version to this version,
Correct.
right? Because
Agreed.
you'd already deleted several of them before that.
Yes, but all along the way, it's
Right,
been
ongoing process,
deletions,
right.
but not additions.
Right.
Okay.
So you're good. And yeah, and even if you wanted to open the public hearing, the reason you could not is you'd have to re-advertise for 3 weeks, et cetera, so.
Okay.
Well, I would like to just say that I think that where this has been such a complete change, even though, as you say, you've not modified the parts you left in, but you've taken out a whole lot, I think it becomes very much of a new ordinance, so that even though we're not obligated to have the public speak now at the conclusion of the public hearing, I think the change is so extreme that we ought to perhaps oblige this gentleman and let him speak so that we can all be further aware of what we're doing here.
With all due respect, these two items were part of the public hearing. There was no change.
Right.
So he could have spoke on these same two amendments that are existing that we're voting on.
Right. So is there a motion?
I will move that we approve the
Mr. McGrath.
ordinance of the zoning code of the town of Bristol pertaining to the C amendment provided tonight by the solicitor in conjunction with our ordinances and the state law and all regulations to do with that.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion before we
Yes, I'd
vote?
like to just say that I'm not going to vote for this. And it isn't that I disagree with what's been left in, because I think a lot of it's constructive to provide some control of the possible advent of a facility here. And certainly we do want to prevent these emporiums. But this is such a big and wide issue that I'd like to have more time to study all the ramifications. And I say that particularly in light of the fact that I've had so many citizens speak to me that they're alarmed about this whole topic of marijuana. Not only the fact of what is happening, what may happen in addition, but the public perception of it regarding the respectability of the town of Bristol. So I don't want to pass this right now. I want more time to think about it, deliberate about it, and hear more input, such as from this gentleman. So I'm going to vote no, and if it passes anyway, I'm going to keep working on it.
With all due respect to my colleague, I respect his opinion, but just to comment on your comments, Councilor Herreshoff, the two that we're proposing tonight is a protection for the residents in the town of Bristol. It's a proactive approach to what the state has given us, with the consideration and respect to the opposition that testified on all aspects of this ordinance. And I stated, and I'm on the record for saying that doesn't mean that it's going to change on those other aspects going forward to protect the residents, even though I believe in respect in both parties, the medical patient, but also our residents, because going forward, I think there are going to be changes with the Oversight Legislative Committee and everyone involved. But I think as the town of Bristol, addressing these two items before people come before us is an absolute umbrella and nothing negative per se that goes against our community.
I think if anything, it's a protection for our community, especially with the Emporium, which is, like as I said, to me, that's the most serious thing that we have to work on. And it protects people's privacy, but it also protects the town. So.
Lastly, I'll leave it as I agree. I think that was well put. This is greater regulation, not less. So, and it's appropriate regulation on what we're regulating. And I think it was sensitive, and we've already stated this, but it was sensitive to the issues that were expressed well and often.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed?
So we have a 4-to-1 vote.
Ordinarily, Mr. Chairman, I'd say thank
Pete,
you.
I have to, I'm
Ordinarily,
sorry.
I'd say thank you,
Pete, I have to stop you, and I'm sorry.
but not tonight.
So,
The next item, Mr. Chairman and members of the Town Council, this is the second reading for adoption of Ordinance 2015-23. This is an amendment to the comprehensive schedule of fees, which essentially removes the mooring and docking fees from the comprehensive schedule contained within the town code and replaces same with a council resolution which can be amended at the under the council's usual process.
So if I may paraphrase that, is currently the way some of the fees happen in the town is it requires an ordinance change. This, if passed, would make that unnecessary, and it would be up to this council without the extra steps involved in it. But this council does believe in reaching out to the public and making sure the public's informed of those changes and give them an opportunity to express their opinion on those changes. So, what's the council's pleasure?
Make a motion to adopt and approve the second reading. For this fees and charges ordinance 2015-23, Chapter 11.
So you have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Does the council wish to take up the resolution at this time so that they would be together?
H1?
Yes.
It's an excellent idea.
Make a motion to bring forward H1 on
Second.
advice of the clerk.
So you have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
So H1 is exactly what we're talking about. This is adjustments to those harbor fees. This council reached out to the Harbor Commission and its advisory board and asked them to do some homework and some legwork and some research, and they did that, and they did a great job with it. They reviewed other communities, and what we're speaking of is dock fees, transient mooring fees, transient dock slip fees. So harborfront using a boat and the fees associated with them. So they did a great job with it.
Yeah.
We had a workshop, which we heard input, as we do with most of these things, as you've just heard. Listened to that input from many, and the proposal that was put in front of us was to change what I believe is actually quite good. Some of our recreation, commercial mooring fees. I actually would like to propose just a bit of a change from what was proposed by the Harbor Commission, and I have a copy for everyone.
Oh, great.
You don't really need a copy because it's really straightforward.
Lou, do you have this?
I gave one.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through these real quick just so we're all on the same page. The recreational dock is $45 right now. It was suggested by the Harbor Commission to be at $47.50, and the proposal that I made here is $48, so it's a 50-cent difference. Commercial dock fee was $40. There's no change on that. Mooring fees were $90, and there's ancillary. I won't go into that, but it was suggested that they go into $95. I'm suggesting $5 more than that, an even 100. Mooring fees, non-resident, are currently $240. It was proposed by the commission at $255. I'm proposing $260, which is a $5 difference. And then the commercial mooring, which is $240 right now. It is proposed $255. I'm proposing $260.
So you really sort of rounded the numbers off.
Very much so. Additional to that, you saw supporting documentation. I reached out to the harbor master and had a long dialogue with him about transient overnight fees, using our slips and moorings overnight and over the weekend. Our fees were extremely low, which is fine, but it was time to change that. And you can see that attached. I suggest no changes at all. Greg and I spoke at length about that, and I thought that was absolutely appropriate. So you're all clear. These changes, and I said, again, the Harbor Commission did a great job with this. It shows a total revenue of about $13,600 in the change, and the proposed changes that I made is a little over $20,000 as proposed revenue. So not much of a change, and again, there was the hard work that was done by the Harbor Commission allowed me to make those additional adjustments. So.
Well, I'm in support of the proposed changes, Mr. Chairman. I also spoke with the harbor master, and he was supportive of the changes. And I think I also want to thank Harbor Commission for your hard work on this. I know this gets us to where our strategic plan wants to be, and we want to expand. And with the Maritime Center going in the direction it is, you guys are working very hard on that. I know that this little bit is going to help keep those repairs, help us grow, and further develop that economic development down there in town. So with that said, I'd like to say I'm in support.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
I'd just like to echo to the Harbor Commission, Harbor Advisory Commission, the input from them, the workshop. In fact, there was discussions a lot on the fees. in the elevated portions of certain sections. With these proposed changes to my colleagues in the menial way, I think it still has that balance on our discussion that we had, so it's not drastic in any measure of all the hard work you put in. So
I'm going to leave you with one last thing before we take the vote, is there was dialogue about discussion, or maybe not as much discussion as was hoped. So what I'd like to propose is that we speak and have, whether it's a workshop or at the council meeting itself, a once-a-year, end of October review of what happened at the waterfront, what needs to change, what the council needs to be aware of, dollar-wise, or just generally what's going on. And, for example, we have a beautiful harbor center that's almost done, right? We took a walk, Halsey and I, and many others took a walk through it a couple of days ago, yesterday, and it looks beautiful. That is going to change our downtown a little bit. It's the people who make the downtown what it is. It's the commercial fishermen. It's the regular fishermen. It's the boaters. It's everyone that makes it beautiful down there. So we want more input. So I'm going to propose that we have a yearly meeting to kind of review the year and see what we need to change, if anything. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Good suggestion. Yeah.
And just for, to be, so that I'm perfectly clear, the resolution, there are only 4 changes, the rest of it stands as it was written, correct?
Which would also include the changes to the transient mooring the transient dock space, which was that separate Word document, large format.
Okay, that was the one that was submitted
through the harbor master.
Okay, so we're going to change that to reflect that. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Hope I can get that right. The next item is the ordinance number 2015-24, and the council will recall at its last meeting it heard from a resident in need of a slight modification to the parking arrangement on Court Street, which is basically right in front of this building, and the recommendation was to have a single no parking space in order to accommodate the exiting of that particular driveway, and this is the first reading of that ordinance.
Make a motion.
This is to accommodate our good neighbor from across the street, and I'm in favor of it, and I move first reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, the next item is ordinance 2015-25, and this is something that I believe the solicitor did outline for you, and there was some discussion about it previously. There's a need to bring certain sections of the town code in alignment with each other, and this particular one would increase the maximum general penalty that may be assessed by the municipal court from $100 to $500.
Now, is it still not to exceed, or is it a fixed amount?
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Not to
Not to
exceed.
exceed.
Okay.
My goodness, yes.
I would move first reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
And similarly, the ordinance 2015-26, this both changes and clarifies the impoundment fee for a redemption of vehicles. I will tell you that the amount that's in there now predates the current code, so it goes pre-1972.
Wow.
Okay,
So it's been there a while.
so it's been there for a while.
What's this council's pleasure?
Motion that constitutes for first reading.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, of the Town Council, is item E1. This is the junk and secondhand dealers license renewals for 2016. You have provided the recommendation of the Town Administrator and Chief of Police to approve.
Well, I continue to object to the name of this.
Agreed.
Because I don't think many of these people are doing the junk, but I guess that's a requirement of the state that we use that term.
Agreed.
In any event, I would move that we authorize these as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item is the first item under your petition section. This is the annual petition coming forward from Edward Correa on behalf of the 4th of July Committee. Requests council consideration for the use of the town common to operate a carnival from June 26th through July 5th. You have several recommendations. The town administrator and fire chief to approve, the police chief to approve, and the town administrator and director of recreation to approve with certain conditions.
I had a question on this one. We have recommendations to go ahead and go forward with it. I agree wholeheartedly. On the memorandum from you, Walter, it says that we do require a $500 security deposit. And the reason why I'm asking that question right now is that last year, you and I walked through the Common right after the carnival left, and there was a function, I think it was a Mount Carmel function, having nothing to do with them. They just were on the Common the next day. There was a square that looked like an alien landed, right? It's a 4x4 that was really deep in.
Yeah.
Is $500 enough for us to go back in and if let's say, the carnival didn't come back and fix this, is $500 enough for us to deal with that? And I don't want to take more, but by the same token, I don't want the town responsible for something that we shouldn't be responsible for.
Yes, I do think it's enough. With the already existing town contract that we have on caring for the common, any divots, it's just filling in with loom and seating, and it can be repaired.
Do you believe that this is more than appropriate?
The important thing that I try to express to everybody is that they get me there the day before so I can inspect it, and then the day after the event, especially between the carnival and the Mount Carmel feast, there is a window of about a few hours to get me there to inspect it, and that's very important.
I'm assuming that you're very accommodating in regards to the time to get there, but it's of utmost importance that you are there. So I don't want the next person to be responsible for the last person, obviously,
right.
and I'm sure that's what you don't want either. So,
Do we know what caused that injury the chairman refers to?
The Ferris wheel and some of the heavier equipment from the carnival have footings, and if the ground is wet because of rain, it just sits right in there. And
Well, we've had trouble in some past years when there's a torrential rain during the setup or takedown, and that's the biggest hazard. But I know our kids love this, but it can be a problem.
Yeah, that part of the common takes a really big hit. There's so many events going on in a relatively short period of time. You put on top of that rain events, and it's very, very difficult to take care of and still maintain the integrity that we want to see on the common. It'll never be a premier soccer field, but we want it presentable.
Is there any new advice we should give the company that does this?
don't do it.
Other than letting me know so I can get there and fix it right away, and I make it a point to go there anyway. I don't rely on them calling me. I'll get there anyway.
Do you test the rides with your weight?
Pardon?
Do you test the rides with your weight?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. We have a great relationship with DuPont, and they hustle up and get over there and fix it. So it does work out well.
So
And
you're
I think
comfortable
the
with
amount
this?
is good, yes.
Perfect. So anyone that's listening out there that does use the Common, it's wonderful. The what goes on there is great. It's just very important that you don't move anything on until Walter or someone on his behalf takes a look at it, so we can make sure you're not responsible for something you shouldn't be. It's kind of like a rental car, right? You walk around it before you get inside it, because everything's yours when you leave. So, okay. So what's this council's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, with the recommendation approval of the town administration and all departments and town ordinances and abiding laws and contractual insurance and liability provided by the 4th of July Committee, I move to grant the petition to use the town common between June 26th and July 5th, 2016.
Seconded.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
I just wanted to mention that going forward that the recycling will be mandatory at these events, so this will be one of those events that they'll need to make sure they coordinate with the DPW.
It's a great point. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Yeah, the next item, you have the petition of David E. Barboza, 121 Franklin Street, request council consideration for a problem that he has identified. This is the building destroyed by fire at 125, 127 Franklin Street. Provided by the building official is a related bit of correspondence.
Good evening. Welcome, David. Spent some time looking at this, and I spoke to the chief and the administrator, and what I found out was, which is actually, I thought this was, normally this wouldn't necessarily be a council action, but I thought it was appropriate to share with the general public, and apparently you did too, so I think we're exactly on the same page. The concern that you expressed here, what I know for timelines is that the fire marshal, and I'm going to ask the chief if he wouldn't mind to expound on this, but fire marshal just recently signed off on this, and chief, why don't you take that from here, please?
Yes. I forwarded a memo to the town administrator. At the last department head staff meeting, this was actually brought up for discussion, and I reached out to the fire marshal's office and asked if there would be any reason that they would come back to that site, because as we know, they had full jurisdiction over that fire. And they told me it is an open case, and we're not going to comment on the case. However, they have no reason to return back to that property. That being said, I informed the town administrator. He informed the building inspector, Mr. Pimenta, and I was forwarded a copy of a letter that Mr. Pimenta forwarded to the property owner, advising him that he'd like to meet with him, and there's certain conditions that need to be met within, I believe it's a 30-day period.
That's what this says.
So that's
so this
where we're
was
at.
all in the works?
That was all in the works.
Okay.
So that was about a week and a half ago.
Okay. I wanted to get clarity. So, David, please.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council.
Good evening.
Halsey, as they say, one person's junk is another person's treasure.
Say again?
One person's junk is another person's treasure, I believe is the old saying, right?
Well, the only problem is that 99.9% of what they're dealing with is not junk at all.
Exactly.
So, but we're stuck with that name, and you and I have remarked about that many times before.
We sure did.
Yeah.
But I'm also happy to see my old and dear friend and fellow Rotarian Mike Davis here broadcasting these meetings live and keeping our electorate informed, because as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I did have 10 pictures that I spent time, money, and effort on aerial shots, and a little disappointed and perplexed as to why I wasn't afforded the opportunity to do so in the manner that I wanted, which was a screenshot so that everybody could see them. With that being said, it has been 143 days since a fire has consumed that large building, which, as you all know, it sits in a residential, commercial area. It's 50 yards from a church, which has a very active parish center. It's a heavily traveled area, both pedestrian and vehicle. As it stands today, it's no surprise, and I'm sure you've all gone by there, with the exception of not seeing the aerial shots. The building is blighted. It's an eyesore. Ironically enough, it was on the blighted list of buildings many years ago until they just threw a coat of paint on it, and it's in worse case than it was back then. But my concern, and I certainly thank the chief for the follow-through, it has now become a safety issue. Although it's boarded up, which is keeping humans out, there are bats flying in and out of there. I'm not sure if bats are rodents, but there are other rodents.
Flying rodents.
Coming. What's that? Flying rodents. That's
yeah.
good. Thank you. Flying rodents. But it is missing half a roof on the south and the west side, which abuts 2 pieces of property that I own. There's also a dormer on the west side, which is extremely unstable and listing. But my greater concern about that building is that it's 3 stories and the floors are unstable. which the chief can attest to, because wisely enough, and I was on the scene of that fire, that the chief removed all the fire department personnel out of the building, in fire department parlance, and just surround and drowned without endangering any of the personnel. But Lou did inform me, I thought it was 60 days, but it is 30 days, but just a little bit perplexed as why it took so long until I sent something to the council before this, started to move forward. My concern is that in another 30 days, we're going to be in the heart of winter, if this follows what happened last year. And what I'm really inquiring about is whether or not, and we've got 30 days going on here, if this continues, if there's any emergency action that can be taken. My concern with snow, ice, I believe that building, and I'm not a structural engineer, but I believe that building is a stone throw away from collapsing, especially with the weight of additional snow and additional ice in addition to the other things that I mentioned. And then who is legally responsible for this if this building does collapse? Is there any emergency action that this town can take to make sure that this building is coming down? If it's salvageable, I'd be very surprised.
So let's get some clarity. First, one thing is that I think I agree it took a long time. Certainly we can't speak to the State Fire Marshal's investigation portion of it. I believe your, as I mentioned at the beginning of it, your request to be in front of the council to have this looked at was serendipitous. It happened to be it was perfect time, as I mentioned at the beginning of it. So that's good news. But if you could give David and this council and everyone here, Mr. Solicitor, some clarity in regards to this, is that after, and maybe Lou, you could also speak on this, is that after the 30 days, what happens and where does one go for inquiry as this progresses?
So if the building official, I assume Richard, will talk to the property owner, give him the deadlines by which certain things have to be done to the building. If he doesn't follow his orders, so to speak, the next step is municipal court. It would come to my office. I would first send my own letter out to the property owner, and following that letter, if there's not a proper response, we would seek a court order in municipal court.
My question to you, Mike, would be on a legal standpoint, they're leaving this up to the owner of the property and not the insurance company, who I would think would ultimately be responsible if something transpires, sir?
And actually, and although I don't think it's an unfair question, what I want to make sure is that we don't go into a place that we shouldn't. Could you guide us along here? Because I know obviously this homeowner is not here, and I don't want to go in a place that we shouldn't, even though I don't think it's an unfair question.
Sure, no. I will say in general, and to address what your concern is, I will say in general that any individual who's in violation of any of our ordinances or the orders of any of our public safety personnel who do not comply are subject to the town proceeding in municipal court. So,
okay.
Well,
so let's let the process play out, because we may not have to get there.
How about this? And could we leave it as that if in the 30 days, if David is looking for an update, where should he go? To you, Tony? Would that be an appropriate place? Beautiful. Okay.
Right, and then if Tony needs to get me involved, I'll get involved.
So that way you have a direct connection and we're all on the same page.
Appreciate it.
You got it.
Okay. If I may?
Sure.
Because I didn't know where you were coming with the question pertaining to what's surrounding it. So I understand the procedure aspects of it. Was your concern that if it should fall on the town sidewalk in our position as councils and administrator for the liability aspects, would the building inspector, although he's leaving it up to the owner due to the law of the 30 days and then what comes beyond that, would the building inspector make a finding that maybe the surrounding perimeter might have to be horsed off or whatever, even though it's a sidewalk permissible use of a pedestrian? I would imagine that all gets under consideration.
If I may, Tony, I think my scope of that, Ed, was if this continues on, who is legally responsible?
Mm-hmm. So
that was my point.
So it's always the owner.
It's always the owner.
Is what the solicitor responded
Thank
to.
you.
But I would say at this point, let's let it go its course. And I don't know what's going to happen. But let's give it that time allotted. And if we need more information, then we reach out to the administrator.
And I can assure you we'll be monitoring it very close within the 30-day period.
Okay. So we need a motion to...
Receive and file?
Okay, just 1 second before I go.
1 second, and you can. So we need a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Certainly tomorrow you'll probably read in the Bristol Phoenix of an unfortunate incident which occurred where my sister and my dog Pierce were attacked by a runaway pit bull yesterday. And I certainly want to thank the animal control officer, the chief, fire chief, Bristol Rescue, and Secana Veterinary Hospital. My sister is recovering as well as my dog. But thank you to all who really stepped up to the plate in true Bristol fashion and made sure that the situation was, both my sister and my dog were taken care of, and it's moving forward in your department, Josh.
Well, first off, this council and the town wishes her a speedy recovery.
And
Pierce.
And Pierce.
Yeah.
I assume that. I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah. He's the one and only.
And thank you for sharing that with everyone.
Sure. Wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy New Year.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we vote on this motion on the table, I'd like to ask the solicitor a question. Am I correct in believing that we have powers beyond what we've discussed so far? If our technical authorities rule that this is an immediate hazard to children or pedestrians, don't we then have the teeth to do something soon?
Absolutely, yes. If there is an imminent threat to the public health and safety, the town, through its administration, has the power to take action, yes.
You know, it takes me back to years ago when I was town administrator, and we bought the waterfront area that later became Woolley Park. And when we bought that, there was a burned-out house there with a deep foundation full of water, and it was without doubt constructive hazard to anybody who went along there, particularly young children that might have fallen in and drowned. So all we did was immediately destroy it and fill it and got rid of the thing. And that makes me think that we ought to encourage, Tony, that we examine this building, because as David has said, if they had a huge blizzard that added 3 feet of snow to that weak roof, it could fall in and kill somebody. So I think we should look at it promptly with the view to whether or not the hazard is imminent.
We actually did that last year at the plaza. That happened where we had to bring a structural engineer in and examine it, take a second look. If that's what deems necessary, then we'll do that.
Okay. Good.
So there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay. The next item, Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, is the first item under we already took care of that one. The second item under old business, you have the request of Francisco Souza, 77 Union Street, to remove an accessible parking space near the residence. This is the second reading for adoption of this particular request.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to grant the request by the petitioner at 77 Union Street to remove the accessible parking space with all the recommendations of the town departments and ordinances.
Second. Yeah, Mary.
There's a motion and a second. I say it every single time. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. When it's needed, we're here to help. And when it's no longer needed, we appreciate you bringing it to us. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item was continued from your previous meeting. This was the request of Margaret McLaughlin, 8 Leela Jean Drive, who was requesting a period of time for no parking area in vicinity of her residence. The matter was continued to this meeting pending further report on the area.
Chief, could you speak to this? Thank you.
Certainly. Sergeant Wozni has spoke to the petitioner. At this time, she has agreed to withdraw her petition. She was also informed to contact the clerk's office to go through that process. The problem has been resolved. Working with the school department and the petitioner, we were able to make sure that those vehicles will no longer be parked in front of her home, allowing the caretaker of the lawn to be able to cut the lawn without creating a problem. As we know, sometimes by putting a no parking there, it creates a problem for herself. If she has a party, her friends could be visiting, or relatives, and before you know it, they'll be illegally parked. or someone cutting their lawn may be parked in an area that's illegal. So it's been resolved, rectified, and we'll move on from there. And we're going to continue to monitor it for her.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So we need a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next item is from the Director of Community Development and the Principal Planner regarding the status of the wayfinding signage program, Phase 1. This was continued from your previous meeting, and you have additional correspondence provided by the Treasurer regarding the funding.
So I spent some time with Julie and Diane this morning to discuss this, and there was, as we all know, this was on our last agenda. There were some questions about where we were in the process. It's actually 2 meetings ago. Why are, well, I'm going to say it out loud. Ready? Why do we have all the one-sided signs? What's going on with all of that? And Julie and Diane and I spent a lot of time on this. And Diane, I know that you want to take it from here, but there's some questions still about where, what the bottom line is going to be. And this is part of, as you all recall, our 5-year capital projects. And I think it's appropriate, and Diane is going to speak to all of us on this, but I think it's appropriate that we continue this to our capital projects, which we can set up a meeting in January to discuss where they are, this one included. A lot of questions came up. One of the questions that I asked, and Diane's going to respond to this in a sec, is how did we go from what we initially talked to, about $25,000, to a bid of over $100,000? And I'm going to give one example and steal your thunder. I said the one-sided signs downtown. So why don't we just put new ones up? What's the darn problem? And the answer is that it's way more convoluted than that. For example, where they're marked, or where they're hung right now is on the telephone poles. They can't go back there again, which means that they have to come down on poles, which means you have to talk to DOT, and they have to be breakaway, and X amount of feet from here, and X amount of feet from there. So all of a sudden, what seems to be a simple process turned into a convoluted one. But I'm going to give it over to you, because I know it only needs a couple more minutes, and
I will try to be succinct and to the point, but also get the point across to you.
Please.
And I asked Ed to come tonight, and so he is here, and he's been, I was advocating strongly for this wayfinding program for many years, fortunate enough to get the funding from the council to move forward, and Ed's been really the lead person in my department working with the sign design company and with the vendors and with the DOT and all of the other people that we need to coordinate with. And I think to just sort of, to expand on what Nathan just said, when we started this program, it was a directional signage program. It was to put up arrows and signage to get people to their destinations, and then to tell them what the destinations were. For example, identify places that people wanted to get to, tell them how to get there, and then when they've arrived. And there was, for people on the council who were here when we did this, there was a sign. I'm not sure if you were all.
everybody was here?
Everybody's here.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. We remember
So you
clearly.
remember, it wasn't that long ago, I guess.
No? It feels that long ago.
I know.
So you remember we had a lot of a presentation of the design. We picked the design. We loved this. We were branding the town. And our focus at the time were the destination signs, the directional signs, and the parking signs and arrows to get people to the parking lots. So we had in the capital budget $25,000 for year one, and we were charged with going out and getting the first set of signs were primarily the parking signs and the arrows, and we had a couple of other signs which I will go over with you, and then actually we included in the bid, which was not part of the original Phase 1, but which we knew needed to be done, and that were the street signs, to replace the one-sided street signs.
Thank God.
So the design consultant, if you might recall, they had what they called the sign family, all the different signs that we could opt as we advanced with this program, banners and pedestrian signs and the whole package. So we had the street signs in the design, and Ed and I decided, I think primarily me, deciding that, we should really include this in the bid, we should get this out on the street and get these signs planted. So that, unfortunately, was, I think, what caused these numbers to be so high. When Ed and I reviewed this after I met with Nathan and Julie today, we looked back on it, and a large part of the budget in the bid were the one-sided street signs.
Is the bid package broken down by
Yes.
categories?
Yes.
And how much
Yes.
is for the street name signs?
About $76,000.
For just the street signs?
So these were,
That's what I said.
it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And if you recall, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Just change the page.
Oh, all right.
He's still writing fast here.
I do that.
I started talking fast. So we did. We had the street signs. They are decorative poles. They're part of our branding. They're part of our, sign package. And, we are getting, so just to kind of recap on the signs. So it was 7 parking lot signs, 4 directional arrow signs, 2 what we call location signs, one at Prudence Ferry, one at the fire department headquarters, 1 large parking lot sign for the parking lot behind the library, which is a very kind of confusing regulatory place, so we tried to kind of make a sign design that would simplify that. And then we had street name signs at 41 intersections, being on Hope Street from Constitution to High Street, following where the DOT left off. We were going to leave the signs that the DOT recently did alone and just continue. And all of the signs on High Street, all of the signs on Thames Street. And that would be $76,000, based on the lowest bid that we have, was installed with the poles and with the brackets. So when we looked at it again, and again, having a lot of conversations with Julie on the budget, and the question that the council had and that the chairman had was, how did this morph from a $25,000 project to a project that was now in the over the 100,000-ish? And when we looked at it again, it was the addition of those street signs. And I think that it's up to the town administrator, up to the council. I mean, if it's feeling like these street signs are going to, sort of bring the whole wayfinding program to a screeching halt, maybe we need to rethink these street signs and get them done differently. They won't look as classy, but we recognize that something needs to be done. And when we made the decision to include them in the bid last year, or rather in August of this year, it was really just with the intent of getting them done, because we know it comes up often, and we want to get them
Diane,
done.
could you advise us a little further on this decree of not being able to in the future put street signs on the poles?
Yeah.
Because I drive all over the place, and every town I go in, the street signs are on the electric light poles.
Right, and I mean, you shouldn't do it. I think there have been occasions where it's been done, but we were trying to look at this as a going forward plan and trying to, I'll say, for lack of a better phrase, do it this time so we don't have to go back in and
So
fix
this
things
is just
in the future.
a design choice on our part, it's not a decree from any authority?
Well, you're supposed to comply with, I know there's some signs on Hope Street that are subject to the DOT, and those signs will have to comply with the regulations. I'm not sure right here, right now.
What
if
about
there's
Wood
any-
Street, High Street?
Those are town roads, and, I mean, I
We
guess
have
I'd have
choice.
to, I guess I'd have to talk, maybe defer to Ed, who's been working with these vendors and with the director of the DPW. We have brackets on some of the poles, so is it possible we could just slide signs back in on those brackets?
Ed, talk to us about that.
I don't know.
There are many street name poles today street name signs today that are on utility poles, but technically they don't belong there. Those poles are owned by National Grid or Verizon. They are not public street sign holders. And talking with the DOT and our consulting engineers, standard practice is to put them on a separate pole. Utility poles at some intersections are very convenient. There might be one right where you want it to be, but on most intersections, if you drive around town, you have to crane your neck and look and try to find where the street sign is, because the pole's back a little bit, it's behind a tree, it's around the corner. So they're not always, it's not ideal, and I think if National Grid wanted to get rid of them, they own the pole, we don't. So we should put our street name signs in a standard location at each intersection, in a place where everyone knows to look at them, and can, people driving down the street will see the street signs at every intersection, not have to look, is it over here, is it over there, where's the utility poles are not at every intersection in the same location. So Are we going to get in trouble, quote unquote, for putting them on a pole? I don't know. There are many on the poles. But
How many do you get for $76,000?
what did we say? It was
41 intersections.
41 intersections. So some of those are double-sided. It'll say, for instance, High and Franklin.
Right.
But don't we have more than 41 intersections?
Gosh, yes.
Not done.
Well, we were just doing the ones to replace the one-sided signs.
I was just going to say, does that resolve
Yeah, it was
that?
just for the one-sided sign.
Well, how many are there that are one-sided?
We had 41 intersections.
It's in the historic district.
Yeah.
So-
High Street, Hope, and things.
Right.
So
So
what
they're
goes-
like 2,000 roughly assigned.
I believe Julie provided you with a breakdown.
Well, it'd be, if you divide it up, it's about $1,800 a sign. But,
Well, that's-
and how tall are the poles?
Well, the signs are 10 feet. It's a steel pole or aluminum, like a fence post pole.
How high is the largest trucks that we drive through town?
I don't know.
So I would say before we go down a rabbit hole on these
you.
particulars, and I'm not poo-pooing these questions because they're valid and on point in my opinion, but in front of us tonight was to talk about where we are in the process and also how do we pay for this?
Right.
What funding sources are available? I know Julian spoke a little bit when we were speaking earlier today about the bond that we already have. I think it's incumbent on this council to decide whether or not we see the appropriateness of spending the money. And to Halsey's point is, when you do the math, is it really that much? And what are you buying for that? And what alternates do we have that are close but much less expensive?
Right.
So what I would say, and Ed, did you want
It all
to?
comes down to materials. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
But what happened to the signs that used to be there? I mean, do we still have them
Oh, they're still
somewhere,
there.
or are they?
I have no idea.
No,
Those
the ones
disappeared
prior to the wooden replace.
A couple of
I mean,
DPWs ago.
could you have, can you take a look at how many poles there actually are? Because, I mean, I think it can be just another congestion to have to put another pole right near, utility pole.
We
So
did
you would-
identify that. The bid does specify alternates, because there are some intersections where
You can do it
we
and
might
some you
not
can't.
need a new
Right.
pole, but, that's going to have to be
But
sort
doesn't-
of
but
decided
that-
when we, yeah.
But the thing is, that would impact the cost. Let's say there
Correct.
were half of them, so I mean, if you
Correct.
had an idea of how many you'd have to put a pole in and how many you would not, then you'd have an idea of, so the 70-something thousand might go down to
Dramatically
50,000.
decrease, sure.
If you can use some of what you already have.
Right.
I mean, so I think
Right.
that would be important information to have. And I think the other information that we would have to have is, what else, what are the other options? I mean, does prison industry still do them? What would the cost be for that, and if we know how many poles we can put anything on already, then we still know how many we'd have to purchase.
So there's a lot that I know that I myself, all that I've heard so far. What other options do we have?
Right.
How do we stay true to what we all agreed was appropriate for the community, but yet not go to this level in regards to dollars spent?
Right.
So for me personally, and I'm sure for all of us, that we'd like to know what options exist while staying true, and then what funding sources are available to us to take advantage, we can move forward. One of the questions I asked was, if we make this decision in a January meeting, can we move forward with this in the spring?
I believe so.
So, and the
I
answer
believe we
was
can,
yes.
yes.
So even though we were to have a special meeting on this, we can still move forward in the spring. It won't slow us down.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I respect that, but before the options, we seem to revisit this topic all the way back from the design. I just need clarity, because the specs of the bids and the total price, because that's what keeps coming up, is the price, and now you're going to give the options and the scope of the work. So the branding, the DOT, the two-sided, all the signs, installation, hardware, we heard 41 intersections. I think the scope of the project needs to be a little more clarified to this council on a whole, so we know how to attach the price, meaning, is it all the signs on every street in Bristol we're doing? Is it sections? Is it certain poles at intersections? So we don't revisit this, because it's a capital project that we're going forward with the town for many years. And if we're going to take any consideration go forward with the capital project and monies that are going to be tied to it, I think we want the big picture. Just give it to us. We went over a design, and instead of just having multiple questions, well, it only pertains to this, no, forget that. What's the big picture, and what's the options, and then what's the pricing? I'm
smiling because that was part of the dialogue, is where does this stop and start? What is phase one? How many phases do we need? What do they encompass? So, agreed.
And just to expand on...
I have a suggestion.
Just to expand on Councilman Stewart's statement, I'd also just like to know what in regards to the signs, because I'm not going to be redundant because he touched on a lot of them, is there a warranty involved with these signs in regards to what's the full package in regards to this? So if we see in a year they're, corroding or fading or whatever.
Well, and I think just to speak to that, because that's part of what has, I think, gotten us to this point, is that we've tried to work with the design team to get signs that will have longevity. Okay. And that is probably a little bit of what's driving the cost. And as we said, if you want to, and we can get into this in the other meeting, but if you want to look at the wayfinding being purely, the directional signs to get people to parking lots and to places, and then have the street signs as sort of a separate program, we can maybe do something that's not quite as classy, but will still serve the purpose. But I think the question of maintenance and repair and upkeep, that's all got to be part of that decision that we make to move forward, and in what phase.
Right.
Well, you had something before we make that motion, please?
Well, I have a suggestion. In my business, when we embark on something brand new that we don't think we can be sure of when we work it out on paper, we do a prototype. And this is a very good case in point where that might make sense. So what I'm suggesting is, what if the council in its wisdom would think about authorizing just 2 items. One, street sign with a new design, put it where you want to, Franklin and Hope or whatever. And in addition, one direction to a parking lot, which I think maybe should go at the intersection of State and Hope, directing people down to that not quite used enough parking lot on State Street. What would that cost? Maybe $4,000 or $5,000 to do those 2 signs?
And then use them, right? And then use them when we're ready. So.
And use them. If we love them, we'll probably proceed to do some more. If we hate them, we'll say change your design.
Yeah,
agreed.
That's a really
good idea.
And just if you've been to the Quinta Gamlin, Walter did a prototype of the location sign for the Quinta Gamlin. So we can definitely look at that. And we've been sort of wanting to see that when the vendor is selected, that he give us one sign before we commission all of them. But I like the idea of maybe putting one out and we can all look at it and see what we think,
That'd be great.
I think it would be an interesting I know that the signs for location, parking, the whole idea of having everything sort of match, I get it. I can see why you'd want to have that branding, that image. But I think for the street signs, to me, it's like a sort of utilitarian, we have a lot of discussion on what a street sign should look like. In the meantime, we don't have street signs. Isn't that sort of like a fundamental thing that most towns have, is street signs, whether they glow in the dark, the green with the white or whatever, it just seems like whatever color you choose. It seems like it's a lot of effort and expense to have something that everybody assumes every town should have. They don't all, and it's very frustrating when you don't. So when I've traveled places, I drive through and I'm looking for a street, I'm trying to go, okay, is this the street? Where's the street? I'm not going oh, look at that street sign. It matches the sign that I saw for the parking area. Do you know what I mean? I don't think most people are thinking about it like that.
No, I'm kidding.
No,
I agree.
No, I'm just thinking.
Well, I'll tell you what, in regards to that, I'm going to look for a motion to continue this to a yet-to-be-scheduled capital projects meeting in January. But I would say that, why don't we speak to that also, is that if we took out the street signs and made them just street signs, nothing magic to them, just appropriate and DOT safe, what does that save us to? Let's talk about it. Let's have it as part of the discussion. So is there a motion to continue this to our yet-to-be-scheduled January capital projects meeting?
Yes.
So moved, but I would like to also suggest that you see if these vendors might consider giving us the prototype signs. It's good for their business. If they prove by the prototype that they're great, it's their advantage.
Absolutely, we'll do that. We can work on that, and maybe we can have one of the ones from this design and one of the ones that are a little bit less,
Mr. Chairman, I just have one other question.
Jazzy.
Let's have the motion in a second. Is there a motion? Did we get that motion in a second?
In a second.
Gosh, it went right by me. So go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yeah. Julie, I just had a quick question on that 1.6 on the bond. What's left? I know a lot of projects packed into it.
I do have a spreadsheet on that, but I haven't,
All right.
I was in it today, I just didn't look at the balance, so I
Well,
can give that to you. Or we can discuss
when
it
we
at
do the
capital
meeting.
workshop.
When we do the
Absolutely.
meeting.
You'll have a
Perfect.
whole
Thank you.
spreadsheet on that.
Yeah, I'm holding my
That does it.
question that I had. I'll just wait for the next meeting.
So there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Julie.
The next item, also from a discussion occurring on December 2, this matter is continued to this point. This has to do with the report on the Maritime Center project.
Halsey? Halsey and I went with Julie, Diane, Rick Hall, and James Tavares. Did I miss somebody? And Greg. Thank you, Greg Marcelli. And took a tour of what will be, what is currently the Armory and what will be the Harbor Center. And it's in progress and process. There's a lot that still needs to be done, and there's a lot that was done. Things that were brought to our attention were, there was, obviously we all knew that there were cracks on the side that have, some of them been addressed. Some things that were found while progress was made was some of the exterior walls were actually bowing out, and those were actually a larger issue than what we thought the cracks were. The fire suppression system is in. There's a lot of things that are in, but there's still some questions that we had a special workshop in regards to this back in August, if my memory is correct. Yeah. And part of that discussion was this council approving additional money to repair the exterior walls, not to add more, we'll call them fun things on the inside. It was to shore up and make structurally sound the building. Halsey and I went to look at that, and I think there's still some questions that we need to address. What was approved, how much is still left to do, and how much money is left to do those things. And after Halsey and I spoke a little bit, we thought it was appropriate that we would continue this to January 6th. So instead of guessing what those numbers are, have frank conversation about them. And if we're all okay with that, if we could just continue this to January 6th.
Well, Nathan, I agree with all that, and as you say,
we have a motion in a second, so go ahead.
What we saw shows the promise of a very nice result, but we were very strong in saying to the contractor that we don't want any unforeseen change orders, that anything that might add to this cost has to be stamped and signed and approved ahead of time. And so I think it was good we made that clear to them. The project's going to end up quite good, and I agree that the work done to reinforce the walls with some tie rods and facing off is a necessary thing for that building to continue. It's more than 100 years old now, and it can go another 100 years with this kind of work done. But we've got to be sure we don't run over the current budget very much, because we have a lot of townspeople who question the whole idea of doing this. And at this point, there's no turning back, and we don't want to turn back. We want to get it done.
Agreed.
But we want to get it done without any surprises on the cost. And that's why I agree with the chairman. Let's continue it to the 6th of January and then have at it.
Okay. So I'm sorry, any other discussion?
No, I was just going to revisit Councilor Herreshoff's sentiments. We have a dialogue through you. You serve on the Capital Projects Commission, and I think more dialogue going forward with the Capital Projects Commission, maybe next meeting, directly with the commission, as you stated, like the Harbor Commission and all our boards and commissions, going forward on that thought, Halsey. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
And Diane, when we have the meeting on January 6th, you talked about some grant opportunities. Could we roughly outline what that would be? And great. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is also continued from December 2, and this has to do with Councilman Harrisoff's list of pending issues, specifically streetlights on Monkey Wrench Lane.
So this is the evening ride that we're going to hear about, correct?
Yeah, we rode in the evening, and it was a very black dark evening, and we went down there just as we planned the day after the...
There's that hot day.
and we actually...
It's the beginning of a book.
I know, it's a dark and stormy night.
Oh, yeah.
That looked like a ghost town down there, very dark. So we actually visited 2 locations, and there's some humor to both of them. First of all, we went down to Monkey Wrench Lane, and I think your plan is to put a street light on the pole either uphill or downhill from the Sisters entrance. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. The poll that we're looking at is 11-2, which would be, I had National Grid go there and visit. They actually took some pictures. And they do agree that the light installed in that location would serve very well. It would complement the other one that's on pole number 4.
Which is quite far away.
Yes. But they said they would. They would install the same light, similar light, which is a 50-watt sodium, high-pressure sodium. That would be the light they suggest to install there. However, the other piece that they also suggest is that they are about in the process of finishing, or not finishing, they have finished the inventory of the lights for the purchase. So what they would suggest is that not to install or add any additional lights to the inventory until we purchase the lights, because adding any additional lights right now, meaning install a null fixture, because they're not going to install an LED fixture there right now. That will be on the town's end. And Walter will be addressing that a little bit later, because we did put out the bid for the maintenance for the street lights as we go forward for the
How long
purchase.
a delay you think that might entail?
How long? Well, the thing is, right now they have finished the inventory. They're working on a price to forward that price to us. So you're probably looking at least, they were supposed to get some price to us by this month, but I know so many other communities have jumped on board for the purchase, so it's taking them a little longer to do the work, to come out with a price. But that certainly will go on the list as the one to be installed as we go forward.
So you're working on it to get it done?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that.
Halsey, why don't we do this, because there is no resolution at this moment, but we're making big strides. Why don't we continue this to our February meeting, because January would be too early to have any kind of resolution on this.
I doubt there'll be anything.
Are you okay with that?
That'd be fine, sure.
Perfect. So that's
Keep it on the docket. So
absolutely, absolutely, and it should be part of the larger discussion about these purchase of lights and what we're putting in and what we're taking out, if anything. So I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I just mentioned more for humor than anything else. I also drove Tony down to look at my own area on Burnside Street, because I was saying to him it's pitch dark there and I can't find the key to...
Well, you have to turn your front light on.
So when I got there, the intermittent bright light on the museum was so very bright that Tony said, "You don't need a street light here." So I had very poor timing on what I set up to impress you with. And
Unless you're Tony, and they had very good timing on that.
As long as you weren't going to say that you were going to be on the corner of Ferry and Monkey Wrench putting tape on the curb and going in.
That been done yet?
Mr. Clerk, if you could go to that next item,
Yeah,
please.
I think so. Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council.
Should have said that.
The next item is the letter we discussed. This is item H7. It's my draft of a letter regarding the Heritage Hall of Fame for the council's consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the clerk for drafting this. I know we had a lengthy discussion a couple times during our meetings pertaining to this matter, which I do support the concept and further discussions going forward. And whoever need to look upon this letter, I would just have the clerk forward at the request.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
Second, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, yeah.
Thank you for the letter. Excellent.
I'm fine with the letter, but I was opposed from the beginning of writing the letter. So.
Okay, forward and
But it passed, so.
To whom am I forwarding it is my question. Because I specifically left that off because I wasn't quite sure where it was
I thought it
going.
was DM, the director of DM.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
DM was...
Director
Yes.
Would you also send it to, like, state
Well, I think
property?
you could
Still have-
forward it
that's,
to
yeah, that was
the...
why I had my
would.
question.
Why don't you forward it to the Heritage Hall of Fame so they know that...
Well, we'll put
Copy
a
then,
copy to,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
And the next item is item I-1. This is the annual presentation of the 2015 financial statements by our auditors.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for being so
Mr.
patient.
Chair and members of council. As a refresher, my name is Judith Ventura Enright, CPA, principal with LGC&D, the firm that has completed the audit for the town of Bristol for the 7th year this year.
If I could just preface something, we had dialogue earlier, Julie and I asked, was there a preference on how you wanted to handle this? And the answer was, she would like us to mark our questions and then just ask any questions at the end, not through the process. Was that correct?
Yes, I think given the length of the meeting...
The expediency in which we're looking for?
The expediency of which you've asked for, it probably makes sense to wait until the end. Some questions might be answered during the presentation as we go through the slides. What I've prepared for you is a presentation similar in format to last year, so it includes some detailed information that I won't necessarily be covering in my oral remarks, but they're there for your reading pleasure. What we'll be covering today is a summary of the highlights of the audit for the town for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2015, as well as highlights of the draft financial statements, of which you should have received a copy of a week ago today, and I'm sure you read through all 88 pages of that. So my goal is to take those 88 pages and put them into some highlights for you, so I'll be referring to the PowerPoint presentation slides that I passed out at the beginning of the meeting. I do want to just take a minute to thank the town administrator, Julie, and her team for the tremendous effort and collaboration that they provided during the audit with my team. It's the reason why we're standing here today on December 16th with final drafts ready to go, subject to your approval, which is a huge feat to get done. So I want to say thank you to Julie. Overall, our audit did not produce any significant findings or issues or significant adjustments to the financial statements that were provided to us in preliminary form. With the exception of a required implementation of a new accounting standard, GASB 68, the financial statements are substantially in the form that they were in the prior year. And we'll talk about GASB 68 in a moment, although it should be old news to you because I've been talking about it for the past 3 years. So that being said, I'm just going to get right into things. On slide 3 of the presentation is a summary of the scope of services and the audit results. We did perform an audit of the financial statements for the town as of June 30th, 2015, in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. The audit opinion was not included in your draft financial statements as a matter of policy at the firm, but it will be an unmodified opinion, meaning there were no qualifications within the report. Just as a reminder, the audit was not designed to detect immaterial error or fraud, but if we had noted any, we would have presented that tonight. We did not. We also performed a single audit of your schedule of expenditures of federal awards in accordance with OMB Circular A133, as is required because your federal expenditures exceeding $500,000. That report, preliminary draft was made available to Julie today. A report review draft will be made available to the town tomorrow. That report will also be unmodified. We did not have any findings, material noncompliance in the current year. The major program tested was CDBG, which has been tested in prior years with findings. The good news is that the report is unmodified. There was no findings. There was no internal control over grant reporting noted or compliance noted. We do have one immaterial instance of noncompliance. I'll speak to it here because I'm bringing it up, even though it's in another slide. It just had to do with the CDBG reporting. Certain of the reports had some inconsistencies between cover pages and supporting documentation, but overall the reports were done timely, substantially had everything that was supposed to be in them. So it's why it wasn't a finding, just an immaterial instance of noncompliance. And as best we can tell, the issues in the prior years have been rectified. So you can thank Diane for that. On slide 4, just required communications. We had no disagreements with management. There were no significant unusual transactions. There were no alternative accounting treatments discussed. There were no consultations with outside accountants, to my knowledge. Accounting estimates, they are management's responsibility. We found them to be sound. Your most significant estimates incorporated within the financial statements have to do with your actuarial valuations for both your pension liabilities and your OPEB liabilities. Continuing on slide 5, the significant accounting policies, other than the adoption of GASB 68, there were no changes to accounting policies used by the town or in their application. In the middle of slide 5, we bring your attention to what we call sensitive financial statement disclosures. Within this whole 88-page document, if you only read through these notes, these are the ones that are substantive. And I just draw your attention, something that we have not had in the town's financial statements that we do have in the current years. In the commitments footnote in note 12, we do disclose generally the current litigation that the Bristol Warren Regional School District has brought forth. On slide 6, required communications, we proposed, management accepted one, in essence, one audit adjustment, and it was not that the transaction was not recorded, because it had been recorded, it just was not recorded to the proper financial statement accounts, and it had to do with the debt refunding that took place during fiscal 15. That in total was $1.6 million, but again, it was recorded, we just kind of changed the way it was recorded. There was one waived adjustment within the audit. It has to do with the amount, one of the amounts due from Mosaico, as you are well aware. There was one of the loans to Mosaico was due and payable on October 19th, 2015. It is unpaid, and there is not a renegotiated note, and so from an audit perspective, we did not have significant audit evidence to support it. And so we have chosen, we discussed with management, we chose to just waive this adjustment. From an audit perspective, management agreed that overall it's not material to the financial statements taken as a whole. And subject to your approval of the draft financial statements as submitted to you tonight, we ask that you would vote to approve them, and then management will sign a representation letter so that we can finalize them. Slide 7 covers the definitions of control deficiencies. I won't go over them because for the first time, I think, in my time here, we have none. As I noted, the single audit, I won't cover that on slide 8. It was the summary of the results that are presented at the beginning, no findings, immaterial instance having to do with reporting. That will be in a separate letter that will get issued probably post 12/31. Slide 9 is some education. We've covered it in the past, actually 9 and 10. It just has to do with the accounting bases that are within your financial statements. It's nothing new. I left it in here just in case you wanted to refresh. Slide 11 just covers the organization of the financial statements. Again, nothing new here because they are substantially informed as prior years. So moving to the meat of the financial statements, slide 12 covers the government-wide financial statements. So these are the first set of financial statements within this large packet, and they are on the full accrual basis of accounting. So they take your fund accounting and they bring it forward and record things like capital assets on your balance sheet and debt on your balance sheet. The highlights include the adoption of GASB 68. So this was the government accounting standards who mandated that your total pension liability, projected pension liability, less your plan assets available to pay those, be recorded as a liability on your government-wide financial statements. In the past, it was just disclosure, so the information was available, but now it's actually recorded as part of your basic financial statements. What that did to the town is that you had both a portion of the state pension plan liability that you had to record on your financial statements, as well as the liability for the police pension plan to record on your financial statements. So you had an asset of $1.2 million related to the state police pension unit. You had a liability of about $5 million related to the state general and fire pension plan. Your private police pension plan produced a liability of about $13.3 million. And this GASB 68 was required to be implemented as of July 1st, 2014. So within your financial statements, you might have noted that there was a restatement to your net position to the tune of about $18 million. And that was all of the liabilities coming on to your balance sheet. I know that's a lot to take in, but it's on that slide, and it is within the financial statement presentation. Otherwise, on the government-wide financial statements, you did have a current year increase in net position, meaning revenues over expenditures of $1.2 million, and your unrestricted net position is a deficit of 9.2, and that in essence is because of the liabilities that were brought on. And so when you look at the trend in net position, you see for fiscal 15 there was a big decrease in that over prior years because of this implementation. Slide 14 gets right into the general fund, which is the principal fund of the town. You have an unassigned fund balance of $7.9 million, which is approximately 18% of your general fund revenues. That's pretty consistent if you look at the historical trend for the town, and that's pretty healthy and where you should aim to stay.
How much did that increase from last year?
I think I have that on my next page. Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that. Hold on. But it was about break even at 40, right? That was 47,000? Right?
Last year was 16%, this year's 18%.
Oh, you're talking about the percentage.
Oh, it was 16%, now it's what, 18?
Yeah, so that
And
trend is
requirement
on
is
slide
15.
14.
Right.
Well, 15 is the floor for from what our discussion is internally. I think that we've all stated.
So at one point, we'd gotten pretty close to the floor, and we're bailing ourselves out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Halsey, on slide 14, there is a trend of the unassigned fund balance as a percent of revenue for the past 5 years, so you could take a peek at that.
What page is that?
Slide 14
Slide
of the
14.
the presentation.
Okay, thanks.
On page 15 of the presentation, it just covers your fund balance and your categories. There is really nothing significant per se to note, except that your assigned fund balance includes $135,000 that the town has appropriated to balance the fiscal 16 budget, so that's been assigned, set aside, and not included in your available fund balance. And the other governmental funds, which principally are your grants, have a net deficit fund balance. It's covered in detail on slide 16. The main point is there's nothing to be alarmed about. It's principally accounting transactions that produce that, but they will be cleared when the revenues are received and the grant funds are received in the next period. On slide 17, we continue with the general fund. Your general fund operating revenues were $44 million. Included in that is tax revenue of about $38 million, which was an increase over the prior year of 4%, and that was in part to an increased assessed value and also increased collections. Your collection rate remains consistent pretty much year over year. Your overall collection rate is 95%, and your collection rate on your current assessment is 96%, and that was consistent. Slide 18 covers just some main financial statement line items for your general fund. Of note, and we'll talk about this in the next slide, your expenditures were $45 million for fiscal 15, which is an increase of $1.5 million, but included in that is the debt service payment on one of the bonds that were refunded during the year. The financial statement accounting standards required that a current refunding is included in debt service, even though its corresponding inflow of debt proceeds is in below the line in another financing source. So it looks like you were very overspent, but it has to do with that accounting treatment. But you'll see that on the next slide. On your budgetary basis financial statements, your actual revenues exceeded your budgeted revenues by $1.4 million, and that was principally due all to tax collections over budget. Your actual expenditures exceeded your budgeted expenditures by $1.4 million, and there was two components to that. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it had to do with the debt service payment on the current refunded debt, and Public Works it was about $350,000, and the components I've listed there, snow removal, the transfer station, and the street lights. Those particular line items were the reason why Public Works was over budget. On a positive, you had budgeted $1 million of fund balance to balance the budget, and it was not needed. Slide 20 covers the highlights of your capital project funds. As you may recall, your capital projects many years ago were pulled out of the general fund and are now tracked in separate funds for capital projects, and this just kind of highlights in summary form the activity within those. Basically, you receive bond proceeds in for specific projects, and then you build those projects or make them happen, and that's what you're seeing this year. No significant projects were completed in 2015. It was just a host of about a dozen there finishing up. Slide 21 covers the highlights of the sewer fund, which is a self-sustaining fund recognized on the full accrual basis of accounting. The change in net position, meaning the current year surplus revenues over expenditures, was $280,000 for the fiscal year, and there were no new borrowings for the sewer fund in 15. On slide 22, we continue with your fiduciary funds, starting with your OPEM. You have an actuarial valuation that is completed every 2 years to quantify the projected payout for the other post-employment benefits, comparing that to your funding of those benefits. And so what you'll find is that you have a net unfunded accrued liability of about $12 million, and you are 27% funded, which sounds dismal, but when you look, we'll just see some highlights on the next slide.
Do you find that 27% alarming?
No, because of where we stand as a state as a whole, and there's actually several municipalities that haven't even created the separate trust to fund these. So I would say, and you'll see on the next slide, that Bristol is ahead of the game. The numbers are large, but they're long-term liabilities. I think the town's in good shape. The town did fund slightly more than its actuarially determined required contribution for the year. And the one thing to note here is that similar to what we had to implement in the current year for the pensions and bringing those total liabilities up onto the balance sheet of the town, there will be GASB 75 that will be effective in fiscal 2018 that will essentially do the same thing for these OPEB liabilities. So that $12 million number will also be required to be put onto your balance sheet on your government-wide financial statements that will further reduce your net position and be reported there. On slide 23, you will see that of the towns that have created trusts for their OPEB, Bristol is the second highest funded, using 2013 data because it's a little outdated.
There's no question here, but I'd like you to say that again. Could you say that again for us?
The town of Bristol is the second highest funded municipality that has a separate trust established.
Really?
Imagine, it's a lot less money.
Slide 24 is just a pictorial of the contributions to the OPEB trust over time. It basically is indicating that the town has met its required contribution over the years that are presented there, 2009 through 2015. On slide 25, it is the summary of your information for your private police pension plan. The projected liability as of 6/30/15 is $28 million with a net position, meaning assets available to fund that, of about 14.8, leaving you with your net pension liability of 13.3. So that's the number that is now on your government-wide balance sheet. Your funded ratio is 53%. And again, your plan is a closed plan, so it's mostly paying out retirement benefits at this point as opposed to accruing them, and I think that's affecting your funding status. Your required determined contribution was about $1.3 million, of which you met that, just over that. Slide 26 is just a graphic of that funding status of Bristol as compared to some other communities in the state, and although you're 50-50, again, it's because you do have a closed plan and you're actually funding retirement benefits. And slide 27 is just, again, your pictorial of the required contributions. The town has basically met or exceeded the required contribution to the pension plan since 2009. On slide 28, we highlight just the upcoming pronouncements that will affect the town. There's 3 of them. The most significant is the one we discussed a couple of slides ago, GASB 75, to do with the OPEB liabilities, and again, recording those liabilities on your balance sheet. And that, in a nutshell, is what I had for you for highlights for the audit and the financial statements.
That's succinct, impressive. I know for myself, I have a couple of questions, and I don't even know if it's a question, but there's a lot of changes here because of GASB 68. And those changes are just showing how the money, showing the money as opposed to in and out as how it was in the past. Those changes look like things have changed a lot where in fact they have not. It's just a different way of accounting for it.
Right. I mean, so those numbers have always been there and substantially that amount, and they've been disclosed in your footnotes in your required supplementary information. They have just not been required to be included as a line item on your balance sheet. It was calculated in a different manner, which was actually to the town's benefit. Before, you would recognize either an asset or a liability for just the difference between what you were required to contribute to the pension plan versus what you did contribute. So as long as you were current in your payments, you had no asset or no liability. So it does change your financial statements, but it doesn't really change any information, and the people who use your financial statements already took that into account, already took that information into account.
Got it. This was extremely helpful and extremely clear, too. Thank you. Nice job to you, to your staff. Thank you. Julie, nice job to you and your staff. It's in large part, in most of it, why we are where we are right now. Thank you from this council and the town.
I just had a question, Mr. Chairman. Julie, excellent job. We're definitely on the right track. Thank you for the audit. I was looking through the financial statement, and on page 77, I just wanted to talk about the upcoming budget in regards to the general fund's excess expenditures. Is there ways we can kind of focus in, Julie, on those? And I'll let you. Thank you. If you don't mind, yeah. Adam.
Yes, and some of them are items that we're we're well aware of, and every year we talk about the difficulty of tackling them, and some I think we're going to make great progress with, streetlights being one of them.
Great.
One of those accounts we struggle with every year. Litigation is another one that we've talked about increasing, and you can see on that, page 77, that was a significant deficit number. Under financial administration, that's the revaluation, so that was another unusual cost that we knew was a challenge. And then Public Works with the snow and ice budget, we've been trying to get it up there. I think we did better this last budget, and so we'll just continue to revisit that again. Okay. And Civic Services is the streetlights, so that's where you see that one. Public Works was also the transfer station, which that will continue to be a significant concern, as we all know, with the tipping fees going up, and we'll need to tackle that one. But
roughly, how much of the 300,000 DPW overage was from the snow?
I think it's in the presentation.
That was on the slide.
Let me see.
I think it was 138.
So nearly half of the 300, 138?
That sounds right. It was, yes, that was streetlights. Snow removal, 130,000, 128,000.
Okay, so it's 40% of the total 300 over. Okay.
The transfer station was 121,000.
What do you think is the best amount to budget? Like, that is like such a guessing game on the snow and ice. I mean, you don't want to like over budget it, but you don't want to under budget it, but you don't know what the weather's going to be. So like, you have an exceptionally bad year like last year, or you have, which we've had, recently, where it seems like every time the snow came down, it was a weekend. Right. So it's like over time that we would be doing it. So, I mean, is it to take like your best, like your 5 or 8 year average of what you've paid out? I mean, something like that. I mean, obviously we're in a fortunate enough position that in any budget there's going to be money left and you can move it around. But even if we had to, we have it in the fund balance. Right. I mean, do you have any recommendations on those kind of targets like that?
I think that's precisely why it's not been an issue, because the fund balance is available to absorb it. I mean, there's certainly budget best practices, and what you just described as doing a look back and taking an average of that makes perfect sense. And there's many communities that budget an amount and then the excess becomes assigned fund balance, and they just kind of track that for snow removal. So that's kind of the line item that they dip into, and then they know, how much they're raising in excess or they're in deficit for. So
that seems appropriate.
There's different ways to track that.
We talked about doing that last year, but we haven't had a year yet where we've
had anything to assign.
Snowing,
Can I just one other just quick question, and it's just like
El Nino this
a
year,
comment,
so.
not about Bristol per se, but on slide 23, the post-retirement benefits, there's only like 12 communities that even have plans?
It's not that they don't have plans, it's that they haven't established a separate trust to fund them. So you most often see them as a fund within the town's financial statements, like an other governmental fund or that type of thing. So they are tracking it, they just have not set up a trust for it.
And many of them were waiting for the Rhode Island Interlocal Risk Management Trust because they were going to establish an OPEB trust. And in fact, now they have. So a lot of the communities who had been talking about doing it were just holding off and waiting for the trust to do it. So now the trust has an OPEB fund, so many of the communities who didn't have something set up, you'll see these numbers going up. Most
more
of them
communities
will.
and
Yeah,
more
I would say
percentages.
most of the communities will end up in a trust in the next couple of years.
So I don't see in here too many urban communities. None of them have the money to
Probably, most likely. I can't really speak for them, but most likely.
She agreed with you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no, I know it's kind of.
And this is 2013 data because that was what they have available, and I rely on the municipal finance department. So I'm not sure whether or not what that looks like today.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So you need, correct me if I'm wrong here, you need a motion to accept and then have the administrator sign on behalf of the town. Am I correct with that? Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Everyone.
Thank you.
You too.
The next item is from the Administrator regarding the appointment of Director Williamson to the Rhode Island Climate Change Coordinating Council Advisory Board.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Tell us
awesome.
more. Or is that, it sounds like a very large title, and it sounds like a very prestigious position.
It is, and but we are very proud to have Diane be appointed to the position by the governor.
Congratulations, Diane.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Make a motion to...
When they reached out to me, and I said, there's no question that she could fill the role very nicely.
Nice.
Make a motion to receive and file.
Congratulations, Diane.
Second.
That's awesome.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations again.
And also from the Administrator regarding the wastewater treatment facility drainage improvements.
There was a request, I believe, from Councilman Hershoff regarding a timeline as to how it was going to play out the drainage for the water pollution treatment facility. So that's pretty much what it stands. There'll still be one more public hearing in January because we know that there are some concerns there. We need to address those before we actually come up with a final draft.
Well, this is an improvement over what was forecast in the last meeting, so it'd be so great if we couldn't get to construction by midsummer.
Correct.
Yeah, hope so.
So true. That's why we need to have that public meeting, in January, just to clarify and clear any hurdles, any questions, work with the residents and see what we need to do so we can move the project along.
But I think we have to keep on beta to make sure they move that along, because that's the most critical part of the whole path, I think.
Will do. In fact, just very quickly, on Tunyar Brook, we've been meeting with the residents. We've met with 16 of the residents thus far out of 38, so we have a few more to go.
Great.
But it's very timely consuming because you have to meet with each one and discuss what's on their property, how it's going to be impacted throughout the construction, and how it's going to be repaired to its current state.
I just feel, I agree, because we have to hold accountability to the people we hire for these projects, and it doesn't hurt to, time and time again, have a record of the timetable of these projects so they're on schedule at all times. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So we can have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next items are a couple of bids. Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, the first is bid number 835. This is for a catch basin cleaning truck. You have two bids received. The first is from Stoneham Motor Company of Stoneham, Massachusetts. The bid amount of $122,232. And the second is from Stead Hydraulic Crane Corp. of Westboro, Massachusetts, in the amount of $121,453.
Actually pretty close. Sometimes we see such big disparities. It's like within $700, $800.
If I may, Kevin, you did say that the specifications for this catch basin truck are a little different going forward for the needs and the scope of the projects to a different procedure of cleaning the catch basins. Am I correct in recollecting like that?
Yes, you are. Keep in mind, this is the truck that was 50% funded through a DEM grant. So the total dollar amount would be reduced by 50% over the length of the grant over a 3-year period. And yes, Ed, you are correct in the type of catch basin cleaner that it is. It allows us to do catch basin cleaning during winter months because it doesn't rely on water like the vac truck does. So it affords that capability. And it's typical to the DOT highway trucks that you've seen along the road here cleaning their catch basins with the clamshell and empty it into the back of the truck. So that's basically what you'll see.
It'll be cost-effective also with breakdown versus the other specifications of the older truck that we used to use on the type of method, yeah.
That one's longer.
Yeah.
Kevin, I just had another question on this truck. Is it like a vacuum, or is it? How does it?
It is an old mechanical type device that you drop down into the catch basin to pull a sediment that settles in the bottom of the catch basin to clean it out.
Oh, okay.
It's a mechanical device that lifts it out and disposes of the sediment from the catch basin into the back of the truck, basically. It just allows us to do that during cold months if we have the staff available and we're not plowing snow. Because the vac truck that I believe that you're referring to is the one we use quite often. It's vacuum, but it's got a water jet capability, which you can't use in the winter for obvious reasons.
Right, right.
That's the difference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not only that, the suction on that vac wall, if you have elder infrastructure, time and time again, you know, if you don't pull away that quick, it's sucking up the catch basin bricks itself.
Oh, jeez.
Yes.
It's very
Yeah, we
good.
don't want that. Yeah, thank you.
Very bad. What's the pleasure of this council?
Refer this to the administrator in the best interest of the town?
Yeah, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Secondly, we have, and this is a bid that was actually not opened by us, but rather in the town of Barrington. This is the one that we share with them. This is RFP number 836 for streetlight maintenance services. There were apparently two proposals submitted, the first from Siemens Industry Incorporated of Billerica, Massachusetts, and for routine maintenance, the bid amount is $85 per incident, and for emergency maintenance, $430 per incident. And another is K Electric of Warwick, Rhode Island, with the bid amount of $315 per regular routine maintenance incident and $800 for emergency maintenance.
I know which one we're going with.
That's a big difference, isn't that? Wow.
Well,
I'm joking, but obviously, yeah. So,
I think Walter can fill us in a little bit more on that, but go ahead.
Ed,
well, just before, maybe you're going to explain this, going with this outfit, do they have subsidiary locations that the response time or, per emergency, per incident?
They're in Billerica,
it's all
far
with
away.
well, it's in the contract and specifies it's not like we talk about overruns because of the distance and the response time.
Just to kind of encapsulate this in a nutshell, we have about 2,008 streetlights, and we spend $145,000 a year on those, on a one cost. You lose your money, $2 grand. By us owning the streetlights and hiring Siemens to do the maintenance of it, we've reduced it down to when we'll be saving about $100,000 a year on maintenance costs at a very conservative level. With this price, this is a really exciting price.
Yeah.
We'll be seeing a savings every single year of at least $100 grand, if a lot more.
can you answer Ed's question directly, though, is that this particular one, obviously it's much lower,
Yeah, sure. What the difference is?
meaning do they have the
they be
capability of local response in a timely fashion?
Siemens is one of the largest and most reputable companies that we've all seen. And I mean, these bids were just opened this afternoon, so
Sure.
I haven't gotten a lot of the information that we need. But I would assume that they have a local person that is subcontracted to come out and do the work, and they have a relationship, and that's what they pay. That would be my assumption.
Well, I think that's crucial to know those perimeters in the contract, especially dealing with subcontractors of the company that's putting out the bid, what's included, meaning not overruns, meaning that they're meeting the specs, but then you find out that, they're adding on a subcontracting fee for the distance, the response time. We have to take consideration of all those add-ons if that's going to happen. If the price is the price and that's
Well,
understood.
No, as you can see, we've broken out all the added costs. And even in the added costs between the two companies, Siemens was considerably lower.
Okay.
In
We
all
don't
of
have
that.
that.
Well, that's why I'm asking,
No, that's a very good question. Where Walt is referring to is obviously all the details that they bid on, and, that's very clear and addresses that.
Yeah, I'm not saying go with the higher one. I just want to make sure that, it's kind of like, I'm going to do this for this amount of price, and then, you're locked in, and then, well, per contract, no, that's added. That wasn't included, so we're in this situation, and this is my invoice for that. And those things can add up, so even though it seems cheaper, we got to be careful on how we do these contracts with these companies, so that doesn't happen. So
Fair enough. So if we could address that as part of it?
Definitely, because that's the bidding packet right there, and that's addressed in there, though. But very, very true to the point.
What's the pleasure of this council?
I think we already voted, didn't we? No,
No.
we're going the other one, no, to just refer it, yeah. Okay. No, go ahead.
We refer this to the town administrator in the best interest of the town, and to actually, because it's on record of what we discussed, make sure those pivotal points on when we go forward with any company with the contract, and what's included and excluded.
And that was a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next, we have the annual report submitted by the Bristol Housing Authority. This is item K1.
Can we have a motion just to combine all these together, and we can just discuss them all at once?
So moved.
Well, did you want to, the Housing Authority was just a receiving file.
Well, they're all together.
They're all receiving file, aren't they?
You can.
Oh, I see, K2.
I didn't know if you were treating department reports different.
To Lou's point, let's just get a receiving file on the first one.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And how about a motion to, well, it already is combined, so K1 all the way through. So.
KG. So moved.
So before we make that, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay. So discussion. I went through these, I'm sure like all of us did, and I found some highlight points that I just wanted to share really quick. This, what we're talking about, is the town administrator's department head reports. And I'm looking at the fire department first. It looks like we're getting a new truck soon, and looks like it's overdue. 2007 International was, it's got 200,000 miles on the chassis and time for a new one. And I see that's in process over here. There's a couple of kitchens that have been completed, and there's 4, and obviously there's more than that going on. I thought this was very interesting. You reviewed and accepted 3 residential solar system. So that's becoming more and more prevalent around town. Water pollution, I saw that we had an abandoned main downtown and was investigated as far as a closed-circuit TV and found that it was actually not necessarily abandoned. So I thought that was a little colorful on that one. The DPW director shared, and I highlighted this one in particular because, boy, has this been something that's going on for a long time. Brook Farm Drive and Court Riel Drive cleaned and flushed approximately 1,700 square feet. And I think that belies the reality, which was if you've gone down there, and I know Councilman Sweeney had a lot of dialogue with the particular homeowner there.
Yeah, did.
That would flood horribly. And the problem was cleared and cleaned, and a lot more was done to it. I'm going to oversimplify, and that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore, which is spectacular.
Excellent job, Kevin.
Social Services, that's Ed Carusi's department. Emergency dialer program is going along very nicely. One more here. Police Department, that's what I was looking for. We have 4 new recruits going to the police academy, and if I get one of these names incorrect, please correct me here. Is Alexander Booth, Joseph Celio? I got that one right? Beautiful. Yes, Michael Connors and Derek Jensen will be going to the academy and trying to get the Richard Jean George newly or brand new award there too, correct? So that's what I had on those. I don't know if anybody had anything else.
Keep shutting this off. There's no echo, though. Just to the Director of Public Works, he also did Terrace Drive. That's been a very ongoing issue, and I think was still going to monitor on how the dead end floods out. And I just thank you, and going forward to address that, because that has been
a problem that we still have to monitor going Terrace, Elmwood, and we even discussed talking with our counterparts on how that whole stream runs through Warren and whatnot. So thank you for that. That's all I got. And just thank all the department heads.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed. Perfect. I just wanted to thank department heads for a good, thorough report.
And if my colleagues don't have anything further, I would just make a motion that we receive and file K2 to A through G.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Following, we have 4 specific executive sessions for the conclusion of the public agenda, and then we have the individual council member agenda items, beginning with the chairman.
I'm going to start off with the lighting. The lighting was absolutely spectacular, as it always is. This year was extremely well attended. The Christmas Festival Committee does a lot of hard work, and it shows from that outcome. And there's a lot of other hard work that is done on directly and indirectly. DPW setting up those stages and putting the lights on so we can actually light them. It looked beautiful. It always looks beautiful, but this year it looked particularly beautiful.
And your snow machine, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
We can't forget your snow
that
machine.
snow
That
machine.
was
I don't know if
just adorable.
We had a snow machine going out
nice
there.
Touch.
My Aunt Dottie Cadiro, started that with Halsey. I'm talking about the lighting 28 years ago, approximately. And she reached out to me last year and said, "Do you think we could get a snow machine?" And I tried last year and I couldn't do it. But this year, I helped with some of the costs with the Bristol Theater, and they have the machine, and we were able to. Part of the caveat, in which they were more than willing to do and generous to do so, was to be able to use it at the lighting every year. So we get a little bit of snow if it doesn't snow there. Bond for next year. We've had a lot of discussion about what's coming up in this fiscal year, and we've all had a lot of discussion about the roads and the improvements necessary, and I just want to keep that forefront. I know we all want to do it, or at least look into what is required. There's a lot of things that we need to do in the town, and some of them are really immediate. Last year's winter was difficult on the roads, and took roads that were okay and made them horrible, and took roads that were beautiful and made some of them horrible too. So we need to focus on that right away. Solar. I mentioned that earlier with approving that. Councilor Stewart and I went to Providence and met with Rep. Marshall, Chairman Rep. Gallison, and a gentleman from the Department of Administration about using the town landfill as a solar spot with no money spent by the town whatsoever. It would just be call it a lease. Now, that is the first part of a long conversation that has to happen with many people. But it is the first step to a great place. It's a good use of the space. We cannot use that capped area right now for anything else, as far as I know. It's quiet. It doesn't make a sound. It generates electricity, and it makes us money, and it makes no sound, too, which is really great. Yeah, nothing spinning. Not that spinning is bad. It's just, this one's very boring. We have a lot of employees here that have been here a long time. Some have been here a really long time, and I have a couple that I just wanted to notate here. James Sylvester has been with DPW for 36 years. Cheryl Imes has been with the town, with Town Hall, and others, actually, she's been in a couple of departments for 30 years. Janet Phillips, the chief's secretary, 32 years. Ayers Medeiros, you know him from the transfer station, probably, driving the big yellow backhoe. He's been here for 34 years. Those are, and I actually skipped one, and I did it purposely. The last one's actually sitting right over there. Chief Canario has actually been here for 30 years, and I thought it was appropriate. Yeah, so it's appropriate to say thank you for all your hard work and service to the community and everybody that's been here for 30-plus years. So, nice job. I swear I'm almost done. Lastly, happy holidays, happy New Year, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney.
Just want to say, Mr. Chairman, that snow machine was great. I watched those kids out there playing in the snow, well, the bubbles, and they were just having a really good time. So it was excellent. Keep that in there. Part of the grand illuminations. Excellent. The grand illuminations were fun. It was a great night, a good economic development night. The stores were packed. It was just great to see the town alive and had a nice vibe to it. And I think Saturdays is definitely the day. I think definitely. Long and the short of it, we're getting to the tail end before the new recycling ordinance goes into effect on January 1st. The recycling committee will be going around to each and everyone's house and sticking this official notice in their door, just to let you know, and basically just tells you about the ordinance, about making sure you get your recycling bin out with your trash, or your trash won't get picked up. And if you don't have a blue bin, contact DPW. Kevin McBride and his team is willing to help you and give you the information that you need. Also, I had the joy of doing a short video with the town administrator at the landfill, and we are also educating people about the no bin, no barrel ordinance there. So I think it's going to be a big success, big tax saver. It's going to make a big difference in the town, and that's what we want to do. We want to be making sure we're doing things that are going to save tax dollars and make the environment a better place at the same time. So with that said, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Ms. Perella.
Well, I don't have anything except to say Merry Christmas and a very happy and healthy New Year to everyone here, to my colleagues, and to everyone who is out watching. So I dress for the occasion. I'm not sure about Tony. I can see, yes, I saw him.
I have a Santa Claus tie on.
Oh, good.
It's hiding
okay,
behind the
okay,
sweater.
good.
It's in my heart, Mary.
Okay, yeah. I had to figure out what to wear, to be festive, because it's Christmas Eve is like a week from tomorrow, so it's hard to believe.
Yeah, and it's 60 degrees.
And it's and that's I think why I know it's thinking it's Christmas, right?
Mr. Stewart.
Right.
Thank you, Lou. If at all possible, if it's not an inconvenience, if so, I totally understand, but I'm looking to my colleagues to take under consideration of changing a scheduled meeting, which is scheduled for February 17th, 2016, to either have it the week before on the 10th or the week after on the 24th. And of course, I would want this to be unanimous amongst my colleagues. If not, I understand. But that's what I would like to ask under your consideration of those dates. If you're willing to look at your schedules tonight to come to a consensus, that's fine. If you'd like to wait until further on, I understand that also.
Lou, what do we have to do to change that?
You can, well, it's scheduling a meeting. The solicitor can help with this a little bit. I think to schedule a meeting, it doesn't really require that it be a specific agenda item. You can just decide to have a meeting on a certain date. The one that's already scheduled would be canceled.
Okay.
And I think it's as simple as that. Am I correct?
It is that simple.
Okay.
Can we take 2 seconds? Does anybody have an issue with the 10th?
It's okay.
Nope, that's fine.
All right, so Ed, I'm going to take your suggestion as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Done. Thank you.
Thank you. Other than that, we are talking about the holidays. I too would like to thank the Bristol Christmas Festival, all the departments involved throughout the holidays for our safety, between the fire, rescue, the police, our welfare, human resource outlet for the less fortunate and the needy families. We've got to be mindful over the holidays of giving back as a community and to come together as a community. So with that, it's been a long night, so I just want to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and being the week and going into the new year, may the force be with you.
Mr. Harrisoff.
I'd like to just also comment that the grand illumination is a great satisfaction to see it running so strong. It's changed a bit from the time when it first started. Some elements have been added which are very fine. The ceremony itself is a little different. But the most wonderful thing is the fact that it's enjoyed so much by so many of all ages, and that this enthusiasm continues and I think increases each year. And that's a wonderful thing to see, and it's a good part of our eclectic Bristol celebrations, which have to keep going like they are, and we need to add one every now and then. I was pleased also to see that the downtown streets have been swept and look pretty darn good. I think the sidewalks could probably use a little better cleanup, and in any event, we should keep working on that and hopefully improve it. Now, you know, for the last many meetings, not always, but most of the time, I've been either inspiring you or boring you with selections from George Washington's Rules of Civility. Well, I'm not going to read one of those this meeting because, perhaps influenced by the Rules of Civility, I was in Washington a week ago, and I spent most of one day at Mount Vernon, his home on the river there, and on the Potomac River, and it was most impressive. You know, it started out that he had a couple of thousand acres, and he finally had 8,000 acres. And after his death just before 1800, it passed on to 2 or 3 nephews. But then finally, around the end of the Civil War, and by the way, it was spared in the Civil War, even though they burned a lot of Washington, they burned the White House, the Southerners did. They, out of respect for George Washington, they did not burn Mount Vernon, which is a wonderful thing. And then, right after the Civil War, it was purchased by the patriotic ladies who have run it in a wonderful fashion for now some 135 years. And they are totally dedicated to keeping everything as it was. In fact, an example of that is that during his presidency, George Washington bought a camel from Egypt, I guess, and had it sent over to please his stepchildren. So recently the ladies again purchased a camel from Egypt, and there it was, chewing the grass with a great big hump. So they're doing everything to perpetuate the great tradition. And the house is quite brilliant. It's smaller than you might expect. It had a central area, and then they added 2 wings. They call it the mansion, which it certainly is. But the curious thing is that in those days, there was a lot of entertainment, and the Washingtons probably were the greatest entertainers in America. And after George Washington stepped down from the presidency, during the year 1799, people who admired him and they beloved him would come by to call, and they'd stay over. To the extraordinary extent that during the year 1799, Washington's last year, they had 627 guests. And the ladies there said that it was considered in those days impolite to ask a guest how long he or she was going to stay. So they stayed, and they ate his food, and they were entertained. And the way they were accommodated was the mansion has a lot of bedrooms. The Washingtons wisely selected the south wing as their own, and that was sort of shut off for Washington's office, and above it, their bedroom. But in the other place, they were sleeping all over, everywhere. How many of you have ever heard the term, "did you sleep tight"? Have you heard that before?
Sleep tight, yeah.
You know where it comes from?
I tried. I feel like you're going to tell us.
I think I might tell you. When there were extra guests, more than the number of beds, the slaves would bring up a sort of a box, which was the dimensions of a bed, and there was a kind of a mattress in the middle of it. But to keep it all together so the mattress wouldn't fall out and flop down, they lashed it with a rope tightly around the frame of this whole thing. So the saying, "did you sleep tight," means that it was tight enough that you didn't flop down onto the floor during the middle of the night. So that's a curious sidelight. But it's a brilliant place, and it's the most visited mansion in America. And you all must go there and visit it and be inspired.
And not sleep tight. I like that. It was very good.
If I may.
With that, I expect to sleep tight tonight because we're ending kind of early, but I'd also, before that, like to say to everybody, Merry Christmas. Let's make sure this is a really wonderful holiday, and Happy New Year, and we'll all come back here raring to go in January. Thank you.
If I may, I apologize, Mr. Administrator. I don't want to end on a bad year either. I just thought of it being the last meeting of the year. So with that, thank you, Mike Davis. Thank you, Archie Martins.
Thank you, Mike
Thank you,
Davis.
everyone who came out tonight and everybody who's watching at home.
Good catch, sir.
Town Administrator, agenda items.
Before I make any comments, I'd like to pass the mic to Chief Canario to give us a few tips of safety and security for the holidays.
Yes, this is not unique to this year or to this community, but as we know, there are always individuals out there looking to cause problems and create situations that make it difficult for families and residents of our community. We've had a couple of incidents where people have put their cards out, Christmas cards for friends and family, and inside of the card was a gift card. One individual was charged for going into the mailbox, opening that card, and taking the Visa card, the Home Depot card, whatever it may be. So my recommendation is let's make sure we know when our mailman is about to take it away, or let's drop it off at a secure mailbox, so we're not running into these problems. Number two, again, during this period of time, we know that there's a lot of drop-offs, whether it's UPS, Federal Express, whoever, dropping these packages off. We haven't experienced it here, but I can tell you it's happening in other communities. Again, we have people that are watching as these packages are being delivered to these homes. They're taking them and looking for some items worth of value. So I would recommend that you tell that to your family, to your friends, and to any of the residents who are listening, if they would monitor this, because it could create a little bit of a problem for you. Okay? Besides that, I want to personally wish everybody a happy holiday also. Okay? And a happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll start on a sad note. Unfortunately, Diane Gabri, who's our animal control officer's husband, passed away yesterday. So our condolences, go to her and her entire family. A big thank you goes to all the department heads for all their reports, and Julie for a great report this evening for the town. I know she works tirelessly and always worries about not to have any negative items on the report, and certainly she did an outstanding job on that. With that, I would just say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all, Feliz Ano Novo e Feliz Natal também. Muito obrigado. Good night.
The motion would be now to adjourn to executive session pursuant to 4246(5)(a)(2), potential litigation involving Mosaico, the Bristol-Warren Regional School District, Section A5, acquisition of open space, real property, and Section A3 involving security for the 4th of July parade.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Sleep tight.
If we could just take 2 minutes and get in there, we have a lot of things, so I know everybody needs a 2-minute break.